Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Violet Nichols, Superintendent of the South Burlington School District, and I am calling this meeting to order at 6:04 p.m. on Wednesday, March 5th. This is a reorganization meeting as we are one day out from town meeting day with a passed budget, which is why I am opening the meeting. My first order of business is to welcome new school board members, and then we will elect a chairperson and a co-chair. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Allie Leduc, who is our junior board rep, and Gracie Morris, our senior board rep. And they have been exceptional advocates since the moment I met them, but seemingly from birth before they could walk or talk, probably. I want to thank them for their incredible efforts in the budget season, not just this year, but Gracie as well last year, as we've endured as a team some really significant changes in our funding due to factors outside of the district's control. But I'm incredibly proud of their advocacy, great articles in the other paper, wonderful presentations to students at the high school, and then even on their vacation, emailing me, the last couple of days, spreading the word about a honking wave outside of polls with their posters. And so just really proud of you too, and happy to be at the table with you. Dan Boyer is one of our new board members. For about 2 years now, we've been talking about board member expansion so that we can have a board more representative of our growing community. This is something the board has been really supportive of, and we are finally seeing it in action today. You'll see that for the first time ever, we are they are a board of 7 and rather than 5. And we're fortunate to have Dan on the team. Dan, do you mind if I share a bit about your background? We didn't choreograph this. Dan has been in the Navy and also served on SBPD for quite some time, where he was a negotiator. And we are just really lucky to have him and his expertise on the team. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
And Chelsea Tillinghast has been on the chair for 3 years now. She has served as chair for the past solid year. Town meeting day last year, she was elected chair. Chelsea is a small business owner, an entrepreneur, and a student of macrobiology, or is it microbiology. Tim Warren has served on the board. He filled a vacancy. He started coming to meetings to get involved, and then it was like the reality TV show that he couldn't stop watching, and so he eventually shifted from the one side to the other side of the room, and we're grateful for it. Tim's done an exceptional job at engaging the community throughout the budget process and learning about different issues, and joined us at every one of the budget presentations on the Budget Roadshow. And Tim has twin daughters at the high school who many of you know and love. And Tim has served as our vice chair. I don't know if I said that. Great to have you here. And he has just won a 3-year term. So he'll be here for forever and ever. I'd like to welcome Emily Hoffman now. Emily comes with lots of welcoming names. She's from a family of educators. I too, family of educators. So glad to have a supporter of students, teachers, and staff on the team. Emily was really, lovely, a refreshing breath of air for us because she actually ran as a write-in. So initially, we didn't have a candidate running for all of the seats. So really excited when we saw her Front Porch Forum post that she was going to join the team to complete the board of 7. And welcome. Thank you for being here. Laura Williams has just won her 3-year term. Congratulations. Laura is also an educator dedicated her life to education. And she has been on the board for 2.5 years. Laura helped out. We had a vacancy and she stepped in, and it's just been seamless. So really glad to have you back at the table. Congrats on the victory. And finally, Seamus Abshir is our one of our newest board members. It's a 2-year term, is that right? So Seamus is a parent, a community member, and he's really good in IT. So and yeah, and he likes to drink more tea than coffee now. So I think I've covered that, and he's got some good TV recommendations. So here we are. This is your board. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm, really looking forward to having stability, consistency, and more hands to support our students, staff, and community. So with that, I will begin a organization process of the board. And I will now entertain a motion for election of a chairperson.
I move to elect Chelsea Tillinghast as our board chair.
Are there,
I'm sorry, do I need a second?
are there other nominations? Hearing none, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura.
Sorry.
I will now entertain discussion.
I just want to say, I think Chelsea's done a great job this past year. Has kept us on the straight and narrow, has put a lot of time and effort into putting together agendas, making sure we're prepared, for all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that most of us don't see. And I really appreciate all the effort she's put in. So especially from a continuities perspective, as we have a lot of new board members, I think it's really important that we continue having her as chair as we move forward this year.
So to say something, do I press anything or is it just
So-
already on?
2 mic system, green button is the local mic in the room, although these are shoddy, so speak loudly.
Yeah.
And then the microphone with numbers on it is through RATN, and so just talk loudly is the key to being heard in person and on the recording.
Cool. Chelsea, what are the important things about the board chair?
Yeah, the important things about the board chair are helping board members to know their roles and responsibilities, being available to answer questions, being the spokesperson for the board, because the board speaks as one voice. And in the last year, I've done so much learning and I'm looking forward to putting that learning into use. That's the basic overview, but
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will now take a roll call vote. Beginning with Seamus.
Do I just say yes?
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay. Yay.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay.
And the ayes have it. Chelsea, congratulations, and it is now your meeting. Thank you.
I appreciate the support, and as I said last year, I don't believe in leading without the support of the team, so that anytime you have feedback or you'd like for something to change, I'm always open to feedback. I want to do what's best for the team and respect, so thank you. We now need to elect a clerk. The clerk is responsible for chairing meetings, if the chair is unable to attend, and being prepared to take over the role of chair in the event that the chair cannot be present. Nominations are now in order for the office of clerk.
I'd like to nominate Tim Warren.
For clerk, Tim Warren is nominated. Are there further nominations for clerk?
Second.
If not, nominations are closed. Do I have a motion to elect Tim Warren for clerk of the South Burlington School Board?
I move to elect Tim Warren.
Laura moves. Do I have a second? Dan, second. Any discussion? Yes.
Tim, what are the important things about clerking?
You sign a lot of papers. And basically what Chelsea said, because you would assume the same role, were she not present.
I served as clerk for 2 years before chair, and I think the clerk role, as it's currently defined in our policies, can be pretty flexible. It's up to, I think, the chair to delegate, and the clerk is the first person to delegate tasks to. And I really enjoyed working with him last year, and he's been so helpful and dedicated and shows up and does everything he says he's going to do. So appreciate it. Any further discussion? All right, All in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand. The motion passes unanimously and Tim Jones is elected clerk of the South Burlington School Board. All right, so up next, we have agenda item 4, announcements and amendments to the agenda. Are there any announcements or amendments to the agenda?
I have one. I'd like to move item 6A to be the new item 5 so that we can hear from our students who are here this evening for our student spotlight.
Would that be so that the public can comment on it?
No,
That would be so the students don't have to stand for the entire debate. Any other announcements or amendments to the agenda?
Nothing from you.
I would like to just ask if we could make items 8 and 9 one item. Right now, they're separated out, but they're both training and review of policy, and so I think conversation will flow more naturally if we just make it one agenda item. I do also just want to note that it looks like right now we only have 35 minutes warned for policy and training, but that's an error. Almost. With that, then we will move to our new agenda item 5, focus on student learning, student spotlight, representatives from Judge H. Tuttle Middle School Science Fair.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Principal Suzanne Grundling, and she is here with students and wonderful veteran science teacher Lauren Bartlett. Come on, Lauren, I know you're a little shy, but the credit is important with our students who have been quite successful and are here to share with us some of their conclusions about their research. So without further ado, welcome, Suzanne.
Great. Hi, Suzanne Brumley, I'm the Tuttle Middle School Principal. Welcome to our new board members and thank you for having us here tonight. When our students get an opportunity to come and showcase our program, it is certainly a highlight in our week. And we will, without a doubt, Ms. Bartlett, right, we will invite the board next year to come watch our science fair live. So to give you a little snippet of science fair at Tuttle Middle School, we have 600 students at Tuttle, about 200 of them in 8th grade, and they all did impressive science fair projects that over the course of 8 weeks developed a testable question. I bet you remembering science fair right now, developed their testable question, developed their procedure for their experiment, conducted their research, and really grappled with what their findings were and developed their conclusions. And science fair doesn't happen without our dedicated staff that wrap around our students across all of our 8th grade core classes and led by our 2 science teachers, Erin Weiselmersky and Lauren Bartlett, here to help students go all the way through the scientific process, really come up with things that are of interest to our students and drive that learning forward. And our science teachers find 60 community members who are scientists and interested in our scientists to come and I think we were on the Thursday before February break. We had all 200 projects set up, our students all there, and they all developed a presentation to go, and they're going to give you just a little snippet of it to look at. And these are our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place winners out of the entire science fair. And they will, we have Molly Pels, Elena Gomez, Aragonis, and Maddie Roy. And they're going to each tell you a little bit about their science fair experiments. You'll find that they are eloquent scientists who are able to draw conclusions and really informative ones that are affecting our world today. Molly, do you want to start us out?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Lauren Palace, and my project was Natural Defenders, how common plants can help protect against runoff. And I tested the question, does the concentration of fertilizer in water affect the nanoconductance in cyclamen plants? Runoff is from farms and gardens is a huge problem because it can reach bodies of water and harm the aquatic life and cause algae growth, which is what we've seen in Lake Champlain, causing the beach closures. A way to fight this is with vegetative buffers, which are plots of soil and plants that don't get touched, don't get driven on, and these can soak up the runoff before it reaches the water. And I wanted to test if the cyclamen, which is a common blooming plant, can be a plant that we would want to plant in one of those buffers. I added different concentrations of fertilizer to each plant to see if the plants could stay healthy in a runoff situation with added levels of fertilizer. I was using stomatoconductance as a general measure of the plant's health. Stomatoconductance is the rate at which CO2 enters and water vapor exits through the stomata, which are small pores on the plant leaves through which gases can flow. I tested my project with a barometer, which I got from the Keller lab at UVM. And with my project, all the plants remained healthy, meaning that the cyclamen could be possibly used as a buffer. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elena, and the title of my project is You've Messed Up My DNA. The testable question is, how does the amount of time under UV light affect DNA damage? My hypothesis was that the more time the yeast was exposed to UV light, the more damage its DNA would be. For my procedure, I grew the yeast on agar plates and then exposed them to UV light. I then extracted the DNA using a lysis buffer, which is made of soap, salt, and distilled water. And after that, I ran a gel electrophoresis to see the results. And this is a technique used to separate molecules by size and charge. The expected results were these, where the DNA should have been broken up. And this is the result of single strand and double strand breaks in the double helix of the DNA. But my results were that all the DNA bands were approximately the same size, showing that no visible results of DNA damage were caused. This could have happened for several reasons, like maybe the DNA strands were too long because I did not use a technique called PCR, and the homemade lysis buffer had no proteinase K. Also, it could have been that they were not exposed to UV light for enough time to cause single and double strand breaks. There are also other kinds of DNA damage that are not visible in the gel that could have been present, such as thymine dimers and CPDs. These are not visible in the gel, but there are other techniques used to see these, like the Comet assay. Despite my inconclusive results, I found that there are many researches on UV light and and the title of the project is Impact and Aftermath Studying the Lasting Effect of Concussion. The question I was trying to answer was, how do concussions affect verbal memory, visual memory, and treatment skills 3 to 4 months after the initial injury? I tested this by having mostly participants with no concussion exposure and a group of participants with recent concussion exposure in the last 3 to 4 months. And they were asked to complete an online test that tested their verbal memory and their visual memory, and then their typing. These were 3 separate tests, and each person completed each test 3 times. And my hypothesis was that people who had concussion exposure would score slightly lower on the tests due to the lasting effects it has on the brain. And I was proven mostly correct, but not all the way correct, because one of my participants who had a concussion had a very mild concussion, which did not leave any lasting effects, but the second 2 with more severe concussions did have lasting effects. So what I found out was that people with severe concussions do have lasting effects on their brain, but people who don't and have more mild concussions do not.
And out of our 200 science fair projects, Elena was our first place finisher. And Molly on the third. I feel science fair, you saw how eloquent they speak, and we are so excited that you consider coming to science fair next year. Is the 200 projects that students had their verbal presentation to go with, And we had a little twist to it this year that our science teachers also invited WPTZ. And WPTZ, in the middle of a 200 student science fair, came and broadcasted the weather clips live on the 5 and 6 o'clock news. So we had many students who found themselves in a situation of presenting live, no second take, no third take, no editors to do this. And came and presented on those little short clips that were before the weather came on as well. So thank you very much, and thank you to our students and our staff for their hard work and dedication, and for our families for supporting us.
Bradley, would you all entertain a few questions?
Oh,
Yes, yeah.
sorry, I did write that on our agenda. I just forgot that.
These will not be hardball
They will.
questions.
I'm sure they're just really.
We are. These were fantastic. Thank you so much.
I'll start. So how did you select the plant that you chose?
So I wanted to test a plant that was commonly found in gardens and something that people would be able to find at a local garden store. And I found that cyclamen was a common blooming plant. And also to test, the leaves needed to be a certain size. And I found that these leaves fit the instrument well. Thank you.
Do you mind if I ask how many gels you have?
Well, the first time I ran the gels, I did not get any results. And then I ran 2 gels, one of which is here. And today I ran another gel this morning. And it was using lemur DNA that was already previously extracted, but the results were very slim, so.
Yeah. It's, that's fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you use a microbreak that?
I just want to add about that Elena continues her work when our science fair is done.
Yeah.
So that's just speaks volumes about this work that they're doing, so. it's good.
Can I ask what your sample size was for your concussion exposure versus non?
I tested 15 different people. 3 of them had concussion history and 12.
Any other questions?
What is it? Is it a gel?
Gel.
Gel, what is that? Sorry.
It's like this technique that you put DNA in the wells, and then the DNA has a negatively charged, so it goes to the positively charged current. And you can see like the longer the strands are, and then the shorter strands, they're supposed to separate, so you can see how damaged the DNA is.
Thank you.
Oh, what is the current native, or what is the current plant that they use in these barriers?
Usually you'll find like shrubs or trees. I know milkweed is a commonly used one. Yeah, just like shrubs, bushes.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For the new board members, just joining us, the board performs monitoring reports, and one of them is, treatment of students. And this is an ongoing way, and staff, and this is an ongoing way, showcasing some of that work in, real life action. It's also just important that we center students in our discussions and our business. So this is a reminder, we do it once a month, so, thank you for that.
With that, let's move to our student report. Thank you, Chelsea.
SB high school students were in for a surprise during lunch today. Over break, the high school updated cafeteria seating arrangements based on a request from the student council. So instead of long rows students have seen in the past, they are now in tables grouped together in squares, which will help create a more social and comfortable environment. Next Friday and Saturday, March 14th and 15th at 6 p.m. the SBHS Talent Night will occur. Talent Night is an annual SB tradition where each grade puts on a student-directed skit. This friendly competition between grades benefits Key Club, the high school's primary community service club. Tickets are $10 and students can bring them during lunches next week, or families can buy them at the door. And we encourage all community members to watch this fun event. And South Burlington High School will also have their annual Winter Carnival next Friday, March 14th. So one advisory in each grade will come together to form a wolf den, where students have been bonding and collaborating to build sleds for the highly anticipated sled race. And students will also have the ability to choose 2 other activities they'd like to participate in. So some of those include like s'mores or a bonfire. Winter Carnival is a great way for the high school to come together, and we can't wait for this bonding event. And lastly, Ally and I would just like to thank those who took part in passing this year's budget. This budget upholds many opportunities for students that likely would not have, or would have been lost if a second budget were to have been proposed. And today, many students came up to us saying that they voted, and whatever way they voted, we just think it's really awesome that students are getting involved in the civic process. So that's what we wanted to add.
Thank you. Item 6, comments from the public. This is the community's opportunity to share feedback and concerns with the board. We ask that you keep your comments concise, 2 to 3 minutes, and that you refrain from using any information that would identify a specific person. Please raise your hand in the room or use the Zoom raised hand feature. We will only use the online chat to manage any tech issues. We are not able to take action on any issues brought to us during public comment. However, any board member may suggest tonight that the issue or question be added to a future agenda for discussion. We may also delegate addressing issues to our superintendent, Violet Nichols. And it is always helpful if you can email us a copy of your comments for follow-up. Is there any public comment in the room?
No, you do it. I appreciate it. It's on.
Is the, press the button on the one that has a button.
Awesome.
There you go.
All right. Cool. My name is Akilis Lakosu. I am a school counselor at South Burlington High School. A school counselor is a vital role and a resource within a student's life in the public school system. Currently at the high school, you have a Black male school counselor who you're cutting. Going through the Burlington School District and having been on the Burlington School Board myself these last 2 years, I can tell you how truly imperative it is that we hire staff that represents the student population. The Office of Equity and Anti-Racism page on our school's district website writes that there be more, and I quote, action planning on current hiring processes that support and impede the hiring and retention of BIPOC educators, staff, and administrators. Retention means ability to keep or continue having. It's one thing to have DEI theory all over the school culture websites. One thing to have staff faculty dissect anti-racism practices during the service. But currently you have DEI in action, within having a Black individual actually doing the work. That individual is right here, right in front of you guys. There are students across the street who benefit from having adults in the building who represent who they look like, who understand who they are and can resonate and connect with their similar struggles. A school counselor cut not only negatively impacts the students, but also the school counselor department will have double the work and students to attend to. This is how you create burnout. When I see that there's new board members around on the podium here, I want to encourage you guys to, as you begin this work, to truly understand the foundation of this work that you're doing. And I believe that a lot of that foundation is going into the school buildings and seeing the work in action. And so once you see the work in action, you would then be acquired with information and real life experiences that would then continue to decide the decisions you make that affect the school system. And I just also want to say that being on the school board in Burlington, growing up in Burlington also, and being on the school board in Burlington, I've seen and have been immersed with new Americans because, you know, Vermont being not the biggest refugee resettlement program, we have a lot of new Americans in Burlington. And so having experiences and being on the school board these last 2 years where a lot of our work went into, you know, the constructing of the new school, we also have put our focus into our new American population and the BIPOC individuals. So I encourage you guys to keep the DI in action with them keeping and having Black individuals in your buildings as opposed to cutting them.
Akilis, in Chelsea, you can correct me here. I'd love to just kind of thought partner with you here if that's permissible.
Just want to be careful not to violate open meeting law because we haven't warned on the agenda for the public that we would be having discussion about this, but I would appreciate if you could respond.
Yeah.
We can also take action to put this on a future agenda for discussion. That's also possible.
I wonder about I agree with you. And when we make reductions, we have to abide by union seniority. And so I wondered about, you know, your experience on the school board and your experience here and how, you know, with these new efforts to attract and retain staff and increase DEI hires and to ensure that our student population is reflected in our staff, which is critically important. And it seems that these efforts, which have been new and recent, are really impacted by seniority as we face these difficult budget times. And so that's something that we've done a great deal of thinking about. And I just wondered if you have any valuable experience at you know, Burlington and that, and we can talk offline as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, you know, publicly say that the value is there and some of the structures that we have with union seniority tie the hands of the district, and it's absolutely, you know, 3 straight years of reductions, 45.5 staff. And a lot of our recent hires are people of color, and it's absolutely impacting the effort. So maybe we can connect offline, but I appreciate you saying that.
Awesome. Just moving forward, I just urge you guys to keep the students, the main thing.
Can I ask a question?
Point of order, we should not, I think we need to.
Yeah, ask a question.
Seamus, I can reach out to you.
Yeah.
Any other public comment?
Welcome, new board members. Some of you are familiar. Very excited to see you here. Good luck. Congratulations on the budget. I have a quote from Gracie and Ally. Nice article. Way to get quoted in the other paper. Impressive. So your mentor, Gracie, has asked me to read a statement that she sent to my email. I'm hoping that you'll give me the grace to allow Rama, who sat in Gracie's seat last year, to 3 minutes, and still allow myself 3 minutes thereafter if that might be. Can we do that? I am Rama's voice right now, not my own. We received this via email a couple of weeks back and waited for her permission to come in and share it with you. Quote, as of now, I read your email chain and notice some parents commenting on the equity aspect of the decision around Honors American and how they'd like to get opinions of the lower income and more diverse families in the district. This comment really spoke to me as I come from this background myself and feel that this decision harms those students more than anyone else. In my opinion, the simplification of courses at South Burlington High School for the reason of equity is simply sending a message to those students saying the district does not think that they are smart enough, perseverant enough, or have what you need to succeed in those environments. And this, more than anything else, is condescension and hypocrisy in its highest order. It is those students in particular that need that rigor of classes like Honors American Studies to succeed further in life. The most surface level repercussion being that academic scholarships may be the only way that those students could afford to attain higher education, come partially from showing success in high-level courses. And with the disappearance of Honors American Studies, that opportunity not only disintegrates, but all the skills those students would have gained, which I do not believe can be replicated with any of the alternatives that have been offered thus far, disappear as well. Okay, my voice, and thank you, Ron, for sharing that. My voice. Here's the timeline on what's happened with Honors American Studies thus far. On the 21st of January,
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
my name is Mark Gable. I'm the squeaky wheel.
Okay,
Nice
cool.
to meet you. Yeah. So I have a daughter who's currently in Honors American Studies. I also have an older daughter whose life was changed by Honors American Studies and went from being an average student at best to a 4-point honor student and is now a university student. And I go to this class. On the 21st of January, I emailed Megan Sweet to confirm the rumor that Honors American Studies was going to be canceled for next year. She forwarded my email to John Craig on the 21st of January. On the 22nd of January, he responded saying he was happy to meet with me. On the 14th of February, I sent a second request to John Craig asking for a date and a time when parents could meet with him and the teachers and students being impacted. Between that time and now, students have presented a petition with excess of 250 student signatures to John Craig, asking for
I'm
honors.
so sorry, Mark,
American
if we, the guidelines specify that we're not identifying individuals, if you kindly.
To the
observe that. Thank you.
principal of South Burlington High School, asking that Honors American Studies be reinstated. Recent and past alumni have reached out to the principal, the superintendent, and the school board, expressing the importance of Honors American Studies in their own lives. Multiple parents have reached out via email, phone calls, and in person to express their dismay at the possibility of Honors American Studies being removed from the South Burlington High School curriculum. Parents and students show up, stand up, and speak up, including Gracie and Allie at South Burlington School Board meetings, expressing concern and frustration over this decision-making process. On the 3rd of February, I was told by the superintendent that, quote, I've asked John Craig and team to host a session for parents to attend to share the information and engage in dialogue. It'll be- Okay, someone told me that he'll be sharing that date widely with parents and guardians via his newsletter. On the 14th, I asked again, and again was told the same thing. And that that the principal would communicate a date and time. On the 18th, I was told that individual would certainly attend the session of South Burlington High School regarding Honors American and have further requested the scope of the conversation be widened to include academic rigor. I have requested this conversation happen to hear the high school team's responses to our parents and guardians' questions and concerns, to hear our community's responses to those responses. After the discussion, I will be making the final decision on the course of action. February 24th, the first day of February break. In the high school newsletter, buried under upcoming dates, quote, March 20th, 7 p.m., information session regarding 10th grade humanitarians curriculum, unquote. No further explanation as to what that meeting meant. In the same newsletter, quote, school counselors have spent the last month meeting with all 9th, 10th, and 11th grade students to review course requests. They will now begin working on schedules for 2025-26 school year. That doesn't sound like someone who's open to a reinstatement of Honors American Studies, regardless of what the other individual might decide as final decision. 5th of March, confirmation that
Are almost wrapping up because
Bonnie Nichols is looking for a robust conversation. Here's what I would ask of you. Slow the conversation down. You know, if this is going to happen, at least wait till next year when there's a firm plan in place for embedded honors. Right now, there's none. There is no plan in place for how embedded honors is going to work in this program, which is what a certain individual at the high school is telling people is the plan. It's not there. So we're going to take a class that's been high school for over 2 decades, wildly popular, incredibly impactful for more students than can be counted, including alumni that are now 20 and 25 years out of South Burlington High School who still rave about it. And we're just going to eliminate it with no plan. Thank you. I would respectfully ask that I can give a copy of my notes to the school board.
Sure.
Thanks.
Any more public comment? And none will come online. Could we unmute you, Bailey, please?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks. My name is Kate Bailey. I'm a community member, a taxpayer, and a former school board member. And I'd just like to take a moment to reflect. I'm a big proponent of reflection and give some appreciation and gratitude to Chelsea Tillinghast, your board chair. And I'm excited to see that she accepted the nomination to continue in that role. I was on the board with Chelsea in 2022 and have seen her dedication and commitment to this board and to our students in our district firsthand. And it's really inspiring and meaningful. I think one of the greatest things about Chelsea is that she is someone who seeks understanding. And there's so much to learn on the board. And Chelsea is someone who has taken that learning in stride and gone above and beyond. She's the epitome, the full maximum definition of a working mom. And I just want to encourage other board members, especially the new board members, to use Chelsea as a resource. And I just wanted to take a moment during public comment to give a huge gratitude, kudos, and appreciation for your service. So thanks for your service, Chelsea.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. So I have a brief and very simple request. So in addition to the superintendent's definition of the value that each board member brings, I would actually like to request that each board member be invited to introduce themselves to the community.
We are missing a board member this evening, so perhaps we could add that to the next agenda. Is that favorable to you?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Thank you. All right, is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 7, designate a school board member to sign contracts on behalf of the school board. This person is responsible for signing contracts and may be required to come to central office at variable times during business hours, just to be a signer on behalf. For anyone feels strongly they would like this one. Traditionally, we have had the clerk do it, but
Somebody else wants it, I'm happy to.
I can't do it. Yeah, it is helpful to be available.
Thank you. Sure.
So we have designated Tim Murren to sign contracts on behalf of this. All right, with that, we're going to move to agenda item 8, which is the review of our policy B1, board members' conflict of interest, B2, board member code of conduct, roles and responsibilities of board members, review board job description, and it will also be our school board member training policy governance. So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our attorney, Mr. Joe McNeil. Mr. McNeil supports the board with negotiations and other education law and policy matters. He's been practicing in education law since the 1970s. He has served the South Burlington School District intermittently since the 1980s and has consistently been supporting our district for the better part of the last decade. Mr. McNeil, if you'd like to join us at the podium. I find Joe to be such an inspiration to work with, and we are truly lucky to have his assistance. I think Joe is the perfect example of someone who quietly supports our district. And if you don't know about Joe, it's because he does his work so well that he just prevents fires from happening. We really love Joe having.
Careful with boards. Yeah, yeah. Go around the other way. It's the tripwire.
So I've asked Mr. McNeil to join us here this evening with the intention of providing a highly relevant and applicable new board member training. In my experience, my first year and a half or so on the board, the trainings that I received did not allow me to access the full force of my efficiency as a board member. Often I was afraid that my well-intentions, my well-meaning intentions would be misguided and could cause harm in some unanticipated way. And so I felt rather stymied in my ability to use the full force of my role as a board member. And impact positive change for our district. So my intention is to have a somewhat discussion-based training so that you're not hampered by any anxiety, fear, or worry that your actions are going to cause harm, and also so that you don't waste your or the district's valuable time and money in efforts that we could be trained on rather than looking discussed. I think there's another framing we want to do. So we have outlined the topics to cover legal roles and responsibilities, open meeting law, collective bargaining, access to documents, and policy governance. Mr. McNeil will lay out all the groundwork that you need, we'll review our policies, and I'll ask some questions of Mr. McNeil so that we can all learn together from his long history and his wisdom. And I would encourage you to ask questions at any time if anything is unclear. I would also ask you, I'd like to take the time to remind everyone that there's no such thing as an unnecessary or silly question. If you have a question, I can almost guarantee that someone listening also has that same question, and we can all benefit from the learning. So with that, Joe, would you like to start with what you've prepared?
Sure. Good to meet all of you that I haven't met before. And good to be back here. I came in here not feeling very nervous, and then I listened to the students, and their presentation and all the work they had done in advance of it, and I became more nervous, sitting. When I started this work, I can assure you that I had more hair, a little less weight, and didn't need glasses. So that will happen, hopefully not to you all in particular for some time to come. With that as a backdrop, I've tried to prepare a document that outlines what I've separated into primary responsibilities, secondary responsibilities, and ancillary responsibilities of school board members. And having said that, I don't want to bore you by just reading through documents, but I will highlight some aspects. And I'll also say that, you know, I'm very used as a practicing attorney to being interrupted by, in many cases, the court, but also administrative bodies, et cetera, and boards with questions. I don't regard them as a problem in the slightest. And I regard this as more your meeting than mine, frankly. And so I hopefully will be able to walk you through some helpful things. Most of what I am speaking about here is contained in Vermont law. And it's contained in Vermont law in two locations that form the basis of what you do and why you do it and how you're supposed to do it. Generally speaking, Title 16 of the Vermont statutes contains the educational standards and statutes for this state. They're supplemented at the state level by the regulations of the Agency of Education. And they're also supplemented here in South Burlington by various provisions of the South Burlington City Charter. And for those of you who may not be completely aware of it, the South Burlington City Charter is also a state law. The difference between the two is that Title 16 represents what we call the general statutes. They're applicable across the state. South Burlington City Charter is what we call a special enactment of the legislature that is applicable to the city of South Burlington. And it contains, for the most part, standards for the operation of the municipal government, but it also contains in various important sections provisions that are applicable to the school board. Particularly with regard to like vacancies when they arise, presentation of budget, and other fairly important matters. So I just want to hit some highlights. I'm going to turn it back to Chelsea for a bit of conversation on policy governance, but I want to, and I would mention that many of these topics that I'm going to cover cursorily tonight are in and of themselves worthy of separate and distinct meetings for you and separate and distinct trainings. You can't do it all at one time, but there are issues that bear more conversation and drilling down, if you will, than there's time for this evening. With that said, let me hit on a couple of the primary responsibilities of school board members in Vermont and in particular South Burlington. The number one responsibility is to set the educational policies for the district. You are the elected representatives. And as a result, you have been charged and have taken an oath, or will, for the member that's not here yet, take an oath to faithfully carry out the responsibilities of the office. That means that you exercise your intelligence, your integrity, your knowledge, etc., for the betterment of the school district. You are a fiduciary. You stand in the stead of the voters, and you do what you do based upon your best judgment of the best interest of the school system. You're not obligated to vote in any particular way because somebody else is. You're not obligated to vote in any particular way because you have received a telephone call suggesting how you should vote. You are responsible to do the research, carry on the conversations, etc., that you think are appropriate. But then ultimately, you exercise your own judgment and your own conscience, and you vote what you think is the best approach. But with regard to the number one assignment, it is to set the policies that govern the district. You have adopted here, as many Vermont school districts have, a technique called policy governance. And it is a method to achieve a result. It's not in and of itself a result, it's a methodology to do that. And you have adopted, you, I say collectively, and it's important to understand that actions taken by one board, for the most part, carry over into the next board unless and until they are changed by the sitting board. You're not precluded from making policy changes, but they don't automatically expire on the election of the new board. So you have adopted collectively what are a series of called ends policies. And they relate to the myriad of things that this district, as a major corporation, frankly, is responsible to carry out. Whether it is, student curriculum matters, whether it is instructional more generally, whether it is employment relationships with your professional and support staff, whether it is buildings and grounds, and the maintenance of your facilities, whether it is your school finance, on both the temporary or sometimes long-term basis. All of those things are set out now in various formats in your ends policy. And you have developed a methodology to achieve those ends. And the methodology that you've adopted right now is that your chief executive officer, your superintendent of schools, is responsible to deliver to you the realization of the ends policies through the mechanism of her stewardship. And she does this by two aspects. Number one is by reporting to you on a regular basis so that you can monitor whether the ends policies are being met. And she is responsible to be reporting to you the good, bad, and the good, bad, and the ugly in terms of how things are going against the way you have indicated you want them to go. And you have the right to question that and mid-course correct as necessary. You also have the right, in effect, to evaluate the superintendent ultimately on her success in carrying out your policies and delivering that. The board, as a board, operates and not as an individual, but as a whole. No one board member has sovereignty, if you will, but as a whole, a majority, the board can take action. And that action can be, questions about monitoring, et cetera. The way that it should be done under your current policy of governance is that you, if you have questions or concerns, they can be raised during the monitoring part. They can also be raised through your board chair, who will report to the superintendent. And with regard to any issue between the district represented by the board and subordinate staff, go to the superintendent, have the superintendent deal with the matter, and then report back to you. The superintendent is your appointee. The superintendent has responsibility to you. It is the one office in the district that directly reports to you. So,
Can I ask a
sure.
question? So is there any free flow of dialogue between the board and the superintendent in the context of the meeting?
Yes, the superintendent at nearly every meeting in every school district that I'm involved in, which is quite a few, unfortunately, or fortunately, there is active dialogue at each and every meeting between the superintendent who is reporting on one aspect or another and your both individual thoughts or maybe thoughts that have been communicated to you to ask of the superintendent. But absolutely, if that dialogue is not taking place, you're not getting the full benefit of the operational efficiency.
Right, and then the
If I
other,
may,
yeah.
During public comment, it wouldn't be board members who would engage in dialogue. I'm not a member of the board, so I can see that, but you will come to me for additional understanding as I understand the program. So it is my responsibility to report back to you on that. And if you have questions, it's your role to question me about that topic.
Right, and then, so for example, so I understand that our role is first and foremost to make the educational policy. And then we've adopted certain self-regulating things like Robert's Rules of Order, like policy governance, but those themselves are not written into, like, if we wanted to go crazy and say, no Robert's rules, no policy governance, there's nothing in the law that, those are self-regulating things.
You're half right. Robert's rules is a mandate. Vermont statutes require that Robert's rules be utilized by school boards across Vermont as the methodology for carrying out your meetings. So that is not something that you could choose against. The Vermont legislature uses a different methodology called Mason's Rules of Order. They've both been in existence forever, but Vermont statutes require both municipalities and, municipal side of government and school districts require that they operate on Robert's rules. And there are, that is also a topic that you could spend a meeting on. With regard to policy governance, that is correct. That ultimately is correct. The board has adopted policy governance as a methodology to do its business. It has set out the ends goals. It acts upon them. It could change that appropriately if it should wish. But that's the division. I want to I mentioned that the superintendent is the board's primary and sole appointee on staff. And so that I would put as a second major responsibility to make sure that you have the right captain for your ship on a day-to-day basis, acting as your chief executive officer for the purpose of carrying out your policies to make sure on your behalf that the district is well managed, well run, that the facilities are taken care of appropriately, that the finances are taken care of, and the superintendent assembles the staff for that purpose. There is a dichotomy in Vermont law with regard to appointments of school staff. Those school staff members, like teachers or administrators who require a license from the Agency of Education as professional educators, you must approve the recommendations of the superintendent with regard to those appointments. So those come to you ultimately with the superintendent's recommendation, obviously, to do the state work. By contrast, those employment positions that do not require a license from the Agency of Education are the superintendent's responsibility without necessity for board acknowledgement or confirmation. So that is an important distinction. I want to talk about the fact that I'll say the third responsibility, and it's not insignificant, as you'll come to know, is the consideration and adoption, subject to voter approval, of a budget annually. There's probably no more, there probably are more tedious things, but there are a few that require the level of attention to detail across all the specters of your operation that preparation of a budget does. And from, watching not only Violet and Tim and the finance operation here, but the finance operations of other school districts across Vermont, it's fair to say that the work that school board members do is incredibly important and incredibly difficult. And ultimately in making choices of more limited resources against more programs than you can afford. And that's not the case just in South Burlington, but that's the case generally across Vermont and generally across the United States. There are more needs than there are finances to support. So the discretion, the judgment in determining what recommendations will be adopted and what will be put aside is a very important board role. Talked a little bit about, you elected a board chair, you elected a clerk tonight. And both have important roles. The board chair is your eyes and ears, in terms of coalescing and representing you in public. It's important to understand that no one of you individually speaks for the board. No one of you, very frankly, should attempt to speak for the board, because unless there is a majority in support of a particular course of action, no course of action has been decided. I want to take a minute on the open meeting law, because this is critically important to your operation. Vermont has two statutes that are very, very important and significant with regard to the operation of not only school boards, but public bodies generally. The first is the open meeting law, the second is the access to public documents law. And they both have ramifications. Generally speaking, with one exception, and that is relating to real estate transactions. Boards not take binding action except at a duly warned, open public meeting. So, Chelsea tonight, appropriately, indicated that a particular item wasn't on your agenda, so needed to be on a subsequent agenda so that the public would be aware. That is a part of the fulfillment of the open meeting law. Meetings have to be warned. There are different types of meetings. There are regular meetings which you have recurrent at given time throughout the year. There are special meetings that are called for issues that may arise in between your regular meetings. They have to be warned by 24 hours notice. And there are, in the rarest of cases, something called emergency meetings. And emergency meetings are those meetings for which the board cannot afford to wait 24 hours before it has to deal with an issue. I think of that as sort of like the municipal and school equivalent of the sky is falling. It should be rarely used, but it's available when and if needed. And in those situations, you have to give as much notice as practicable to available media so that they can represent. There are also the obligation in the open meeting law to take minutes. And the minutes have to describe in general the topics that you discussed, the discussion that was had, and the votes that were taken, so that the public can follow your actions. Here, I'll pause though to say that although the public has opportunity for input, and the statute, the open meeting law, says that the public has to be given reasonable opportunity to speak to items that the board is considering. The public has not been elected. You have been elected. So ultimately, while you may take advice from the public, the ultimate decision-making is yours. So there will come a time in a meeting when you say, okay, thank you very much. We've heard, now we're going to have board discussion, and we're going to have sometimes board debate, and we're going to have votes taken. That's called representative democracy. As opposed to Athenian democracy, where the whole community comes together and, debates, discusses, and whatever, and then votes. That's not our style in the United States. It's not the style in Vermont. We follow elected representative democracy. Another point that I want to make relates to your responsibility for financing. There are times when the board needs money. And, the district needs money. And sometimes that need arises in advance of the collection of taxes and the delivery of those taxes to you. You have the authority to borrow in anticipation of taxes. You have done that from time to time. That's a board action that can be taken. There are also, however, times when you need, like, major capital facilities, renewals or replacements. And that cannot be done just on the board action alone. That requires referendum approval by the electorate. So if you're going to, they call it pledge the credit, if you're going to pledge the credit of the district such that, if necessary, taxes will be raised for the purpose of repaying the debt, and you're going to borrow money on that basis, you need to have voter approval in advance. So that is another example. It's starting to drone on, and I don't want to, but I do want to hit on just a couple of additional things. I mentioned the so-called open meeting law. I also want to mention the access to public documents, because this affects you directly. The Vermont law with regard to public documents is that any communication sent and received in the ordinary course of public business is regarded as a public record. And that is available for inspection, copying, etc., by members of the public upon request, unless it falls into one of the exemption categories. There are certain exemption categories, but, and we can get into that in detail at a subsequent meeting. But I want to talk about the unwary traps. You all have a South Burlington School District, or will have a South Burlington School District email address. Use it. Do not use your personal email address for South Burlington School Board business. And one of the practical reasons that you should not do that is because if you do, and if the public raises a question about wanting to see any communication that you have written about South Burlington School District affairs, it's quite possible that a judge will say, I want to see all of your emails, and I will separate out those that relate to the business of South Burlington and those that do not. Most people would not prefer that. So the practice pointer is use your South Burlington email. Second practice pointer, put tape over the darn reply all button. Put tape over the reply all button. It gets people in trouble. If you have a matter that you're discussing and you're legitimately doing it one-on-one, let's say, but you hit reply all and it goes out to people that are outside of the group, you've just lost whatever privilege, whatever limitation there may be. So practical pointer, try not to use reply. Understand that the use of emails, the use of text, the use of any form of electronic communication can, under certain circumstances, represent a violation of the open meeting law. And so you need to be very careful about that. If, for example, I'm aging myself, but refer to it as a chat room. If there are a quorum of you coming together simultaneously and having a discussion, even though it's by electronic means, that would be regarded as a meeting. The law says no action can be taken unless it's a duly warned meeting in open session. That would not be an open session, wouldn't be duly warned, so any action that you would take would be invalid. But even more significantly for you as members, the Vermont law says that if there's an intentional violation of the open meeting law, you're subject to fine up to $500.
Joe, can I give an example of what that might look like? So we use Google and Google Docs. So if the board were doing something as simple as editing a Google Doc, one Google Doc, that would be a violation of open meeting law. You can't break open meeting law with me through communication because I am your employee and I'm not a member of the board. But I wanted to just provide that as a point.
I could also, if I could follow up, in the last year as chair, I have weekly meetings with the superintendent, when the superintendent updates me to different issues or topics that we're discussing at the board level. And I will send an email to the full board with a summary of my meeting with the superintendent. And as a regular practice, I send it to myself and I copy the superintendent and then I blind copy the whole board so that you're all given the information. But if any of you hit reply or reply all, it will only go to me and the superintendent, so you can't accidentally violate open meeting law by replying to all of the board members. And so it is best practice that if you have a question or concern or comment, that you are not saying it's in between meetings or it's something that you've heard and you want it communicated to the board, best practice would be to email it to me. And I will collect it, or I can respond to you. If I feel like it's something that you need the whole board to know, we'll either talk about it in open session or executive session, depending on what kind of topic it is. But I feel like I've been, in the past, I've said, you understand what I'm saying, right? Open meeting law. And then I have very well-meaning board members who are prepared to write an email to the full board with everybody like available to respond back. And if anyone responded back, that would be a violation, correct, Joe?
Yes, the difference is that, let's say I wrote to you, Seamus, I'm a board member, I wrote to you, Seamus, and you wait a day and then you write your thoughts to Laura, okay? That's not a meeting. That is two board members communicating. But let's assume that instead of writing to Laura, you write to everyone on the board, or you write to a forum of the board and they respond. Now you've got a conversation going. And that conversation is in real time. That's a meeting. And so those are the two bookends, if you will, of this conversation. And let me just say that Vermont law is still emerging in this regard. California has a thing called successive participation in meetings. So like if I write to you and you write to Laura an hour later, California would regard that as simultaneous. Vermont hasn't quite gotten there, but I would point out as a risk of coming attractions that we're more heading there than not heading there, because the notion is that we're conducting the people's business. And generally speaking, the people have the right to know what you're doing as public officials. So be careful about creating what amounts to a meeting by simultaneous exchanges. I also want to point out a different topic, and that is collective bargaining.
So,
Yeah,
I just have two clarifications.
sure.
So in that instance, Joe, I write an email, send it to Seamus about something, you know, that's on the board's mind, or we've been talking about in an open meeting. Seamus writes to Laura and says, you know, Tim was thinking this, you know, blah, blah, blah. Laura takes that up and sends it over to Dan and says, now, we have just essentially done that chain and we violated really the open meeting law. That-
Yes.
Or we're close enough where.
It's close enough for government work,
That's okay.
and close enough to be very, very worried. There, in that scenario that you've just outlined, Tim, that's a better example than I, put together on that successive chain. It looks more like simultaneous conversation than it does two board members having a discussion about what policy positions will be taken next week. And so I can't give you an exact division line at this point, but I can tell you that it is an area where caution should be, needs to be applied, because doubt will be fatal to your plan. And so, more later, I would hope, with regard to open meeting law, access to public documents law, and the nuances of that, we could spend hours on it, frankly, that we don't have this evening. I do want, go ahead, Tim. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I want to go back to the Google Documents example, because now I'm sitting here saying, okay, I've created a Google document. I put a bunch of stuff in it, you know, as we're preparing maybe a policy or something. I want people to read it, but should I now say, I don't want them to be able to edit it? Because then we sort of cross that line into, right? Because this happens a lot. We do create Google Docs. People have access to them. Should we be very wary of that?
If, again, the open meeting law and the access to public documents law are sort of at a peace with one another. So if you are simultaneously editing a document, it's the same thing as if you're simultaneously having a conversation. That is a meeting. And it will reflect, that way upon any sort of challenge. If you write a policy and then you send it off to both, whether it's the student reps or your other board members and say, what do you think? And you're getting something back 2 or 3 days from now, that's not a meeting. That may be good, that may be great governance. But you need to be very, very careful in how you do that.
Thank
So
you.
BCC only, don't apply all. Scheduling is the one exemption, and Google Docs, view only, no comment access, no edit access.
Got it. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
And in terms of the successive meetings, like, let's say that we send something out, view only, BCC only, to the whole board. And then is there a difference between whether somebody replies in 4 hours versus 3 days?
Potential.
Right.
That's an answer that I cannot give you definitively because the Vermont Supreme Court hasn't ruled on it. What the Attorney General has advised to public bodies across the state is to avoid simultaneous or near simultaneous interaction among board members. That way, you're safe. If you're not doing that, you're safe. If you're, if it's a day later, I'm not concerned about that, frankly. Where I am concerned is if it's an hour later, where I don't really know, but I'd be cautious and nervous, is if it's, say, two hours, and it's looking more like a meeting than it's looking like, an exchange of viewpoints, for future. I want to, if I may, jump into collective bargaining because, it's been more time than.
We could have like a special training that of the meeting law. It's helpful just to get like some basic best practices out there right away. We do have executive session also after our regular session tonight, and that will be an opportunity for new board members to be part on collective bargaining.
I don't
So
think I don't think it would be a proper use of executive session to talk in executive session about how executive session should be conducted. But let me just say that there are statutory criteria for going into executive sessions. Common among them are contractual negotiations, real estate matters, personnel matters, where premature disclosure could put you at a disadvantage. There needs to be a majority vote to go into executive session. And you need to be very careful about executive session creep. And that is, you go into executive session for a topic that is identified in advance when you vote. And then, oh yeah, that gives me an idea about something that happened last Wednesday and you raised a question about that. That's impermissible creep. You need to stay on task in the executive session.
And presumably, once the executive session starts, you kicked out the public, you can't stop it and go back in the public.
You can, if you could divide your executive session topics if you wanted to, or you could identify a number of topics and cover them all in serial fashion in executive session. The one thing that I will say additionally is that more problems have occurred by loose lips sinking ships than I would like to imagine across public sectors in Vermont and elsewhere. The reason you go into executive session is because you have something of a confidential nature where you want to be able to discuss it candidly, openly, and, you know, without worry about prejudicing yourself before you come to a determination. If you go in for that purpose and then come right out and talk to the public about what just happened in executive session, well, there's no need to go into executive session because you've just publicized everything that you thought should be confidential. So don't do it. And be careful of what I call pillow talk. There is a tendency to believe that among board members that, you know, your closest personal and societal friends and relatives, they'll keep your confidence. Well, they don't. And so more problems have developed with people going into executive session and then saying, I'm just going to tell you, please keep it to yourself. Number one, you've just eliminated any privilege that might be associated with the executive session, but more significantly, perhaps, you've done away with and I've been victim by it. I hasten to add, I had a situation, not this board, but another board one time where we were talking about a very complicated piece of litigation. I had outlined it all in writing in terms of what position we should be taking and why. And I told the board members that I wanted to collect those notes at the end of the executive session. And I learned the next day that one member hadn't turned a copy back to me and had left it at the table of the board meeting. And both a reporter and somebody on the other side discovered it. The attorney on the other side, fortuitously, was an attorney of great ethics and turned it back to me saying, I don't think I should have this. The reporter, on the other hand, well, acted as a reporter. Yeah. But just a word to the wise. With regard to collective bargaining, the statute talks about bargaining through appointed committees, appointed representatives of the board. Use that process. Don't think that you can go rogue or individually and do what the committee has been appointed to do. Have your discussions about whether the committee is following your advice, etc., in your executive sessions. But speaking out of school, if you will, with regard to collective bargaining matters to the public or to even, to the people on the other side, is a mistake. And it's a mistake that leads very often, to prejudicing yourself and compromising the positions that, you want to hold, strategically and tactically. So, be careful about that, operate through your committees, more on collective bargaining to come. And I'll turn it back to you, Chelsea, subject to questions, the other.
So, Joe, so for executive, session, do we need 2 motions for this size board?
There are certain aspects, Vermont law is divided into, 2 types of executive session motions. One part where you can go in just on one motion, where premature public knowledge will put you at a substantial disadvantage.
Right.
The other part by statute is you have to intone that there is, a disadvantage to be gained if you don't, vote, in two motions. So I can walk you through that as need be. I know you've got a cook, Chelsea has a cookbook on that.
Because it's the first motion of what you were saying. I moved to find that premature general public knowledge regarding the superintendent, whatever. You know, giving you example, places the board is substantial disadvantage, and then you.
Yeah.
And then the second motion, I moved to enter
Yeah.
for the.
And there are a limited number of things where you don't need to do that.
Oh,
first part,
okay.
and you can just do the second.
Okay, great. And then, honestly, I don't know, so I can ask you this later. Go ahead.
That's great. Any other questions so far? Is this helpful? Like, is it highly relevant to the things you're gonna be faced and tasked with right away?
So I have a question. So like, let's say a friend of mine sends me an email asking about the school district to my personal email. Should I reply back to them saying, send this to my other email, or?
I would say that we have been given an address and a means to deal with business, South Burlington business, and I really appreciate it if you would deal with me through that mechanism. That's the safest course of action. You've got, many corporations require that their senior, many employees have 2 phones. One in which they do, their corporate business and the other in which they do their personal business. You've got accounts, to utilize, school district .edu, right? Use that.
I had a quick question, okay. In terms of the Google Doc conversation we were having, and I'm assuming it's just best practice to never be able to communicate that way, but I'm just curious if we were communicating about a potluck that we were planning on having just between us.
Great
Great
question.
Okay.
Absolutely okay.
Okay.
You can come together at a holiday party, all of you present. And enjoy the festivities of the party. However, if during the party, you say, oh, by the way, we have this meeting coming up on Tuesday, let's discuss what we're going to do on, item 3. You've just gone from a convivial party experience to a violation of the open meeting.
Well, and because of open meeting law, it would, if you were in a forum at any point in time, it would be required to be a public meeting. And people could literally sit and watch you on a Zoom eat your dinner. Seriously.
I think there's like room for, we theoretically could gather and it not be a meeting, but if there's the appearance that it's a meeting, that's a problem. And so it's really difficult.
Yeah, there's a couple of other examples I can give. The law allows you to come together for a training, very frankly, that is not subject to the typical standards of the open meeting law. And it also allowed you to come together at some other entity's meeting. So like, say the Agency of Education was having seminar or the SBA was having a seminar for school board members. And there's a quorum of you present, that's perfectly fine. Again, just don't separate yourselves into a corner and start talking about South Burlington districts. That's the violation.
Do not stand next to each other at a soccer game. Do not work a bake sale together. Do not have the appearance of quorum.
So,
Challenge is the appearance, it's like, once there's an accusation, it's pretty difficult to prove that we weren't talking about board business unless we were recording it. And so it's just kind of best practice not to even, I feel the same about the open meeting law stuff, like, sure, there's like little workarounds that you could do, but you may not necessarily be able to prove your innocence, and it's really damaging to not just have the best practice appearance from the start.
So from like a legal point of view, presumably we would have the innocent until proven guilty, but in the public eye, we wouldn't have that same.
Yeah, it's a good point, yeah. It's all about perception. If there's any perceived.
One more question about that. If we were to go to like the science fairs next year together, would we, if we were all there, would that be a problem?
no, so long as you're paying attention to the beautiful presentations by the students. You're asking the students questions, you're interacting with them. You're not interacting with your fellow board members, you're interacting with the students, that's okay. That's encouraged, go to graduation, you know, there's another good example. But be careful about what I would call creep into it.
Thanks.
Did I bore you sufficiently?
No, but I do still have some questions for you, so please don't.
I'm ready.
Any other questions so far?
So we could have a recorded problem
Yeah, we could. And
and welcome members of the public.
I think that the SBA did just put out guidance that they're recommending retreats and trainings be
Yes.
warned and recorded.
It says warned and recorded, so warned, minutes, recorded and posted. That's the new.
That's their advice. And
That's their
it's
advice.
certainly good advice. You can't go wrong, even though
yeah.
there is an exception in the statute for training.
We had a meet and greet with city council. The two bodies will work together. We had a warned dinner, and there were people in person, there were chairs, and it was also a requirement by law that we broadcast, we offer accessibility through Zoom or other mechanisms virtually.
So social gatherings, right, that's the exception, correct? It says
Social gatherings
conventions,
is definitely
conferences,
an
training.
exception.
Okay, those are the, okay, got it, so we could.
So we theoretically, the whole board could attend the VSBA conference, and we wouldn't bring a tech and a minute taker along with us to the
Right,
conference.
right.
So we have the whole time,
Got it, yeah.
but also a VSBA conference is a pretty usual thing for board members to
Right.
attend, so.
Yeah, and that's as I said, it's perfectly permissible. Just don't break out into a work group that is your board. Because then you're.
I'm a stickler and a rule follower, so if I give you friendly reminders, please understand it's because I think these are nuanced and I don't want folks to get in trouble or to, jeopardize the district. So forgive me if it seems snacky or.
Same.
It would also be a shame for someone to like get in trouble and it wasn't even their intention to do something wrong. It's just like having some grace for humans being humans. That's the purpose of the training, is to try to help them see from that.
I would just say parenthetically that it is a legal obligation for school board chairs and for superintendents to have annual training with regard to, that is a minimum, annual training with regard to, among other items, the open meeting. So constant vigilance on your behalf as a superintendent is a great tool. And I would say too, if there is any question whatsoever that you have, there's no dumb legal question about the applicability of the open meeting law. And not only that, it's to your advantage to ask a question. Because if, like, you go to Violet and say, hey, I'm wondering about this, and she comes to me and or Chelsea does, and I provide an answer. By implication, you're not intentionally violating the statute because you're inquiring as to how to comply with it. That would be the best, that would be great evidence if somebody were to assert that you should be fined for intentionally violating the statute.
And are we allowed to ask you directly? Like, are you? Like,
Yeah,
are we?
Joe is very expensive, and so best practice is for you to ask me, and if I don't know, I'll ask Joe.
Right, but from a formal, like are you my lawyer?
I am counsel to the South Burlington School District as rep, so I ultimately, my responsibility is to the educational corporation to make sure that all of you stay within the law. Having said that, my primary contact is through the board. And I don't represent you individually or you individually, but I represent the board collectively.
And there have been many questions asked of Joe, and commonly I can just forward you what he said in the past about that same question. So like, instead of having board members contacting Joe all the time, I take responsibility for utilizing his time and efforts. And certainly if my answer is not satisfactory, say so, and then I will happily connect Joe or forward the request.
And in case of stormy weather, let's say there's a real emergent need, I'd rather have you asked than not asked, so that.
Are you concerned ever that since it's not legal advice coming from anybody but you? You know, like, are there any lines you're like, just, only ask me about that?
I'm not a shrinking violet, so I would tell you if I thought that, a question was out of bounds, but in all of my decades, there have been, I could count on one hand probably the questions that I wouldn't think I should try to answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, like, for example, if I have a question, which is effectively a legal question, and I ask you and you tell me something, that's not legal advice.
That's correct.
And so is there any
But
I have, as soon as Chelsea asks me a question on behalf of the board, or Violet does on behalf of the board or the administration, I am in an attorney-client relationship. And so
and the three of us are covered?
you're all covered. I can answer that question, subject to the attorney-client privilege.
So Joe, I am harkening back to, when we had onboarded a board member regarding personal liability and, could he be pursued personally? Can I ask you at this time to detail, the, coverage,
Sure.
to liability that all of the board members are subject to?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, great question. Start with the administration all the way down to, teachers, support staff, et cetera. If you're acting within the scope of your responsibilities, then you are covered by the district's insurance policies and you're entitled to representation, if you will, should that be challenged. As a board member, if you are acting within the apparent scope of your responsibilities, you're asking questions, you're doing whatever. You're covered by insurance, you're covered by board policy, you'll be provided defense and indemnification. If on the other hand, you stick your finger in the cookie jar, or you let's say, commit an assault or commit discrimination based upon protected characteristics. There, the board through council will do a preliminary inquiry as to whether you're within the scope of your activity. If it's determined that you were, fine, you'll be covered. If it's determined that you've intentionally violated statutes or regular law, in this case statutes. Like if you discriminate on the basis of gender, if you discriminate on the basis of religion, don't expect to be much covered by the district. You will be cut adrift. Sometimes wish not to win that.
So you're employees of the district, so as other employees would also be subject to.
And just, sorry to, so if I send an email to Chelsea. And then Chelsea's, whether or not you respond to me, and then you end up going back with Joe. Is the original email that I sent to you protected?
The question, the interaction between Chelsea and me, which would entail the question. Let's assume you ask her a question, she repeats it, seeking legal advice. I would provide that advice and the entire board would be covered.
But what if I provided some information to her that was of interest to the other party?
If you're having a conversation with Chelsea in and of itself that does not involve a legal question, start there. That is a communication which would be subject to disclosure under the access to public documents law because it's sent and received in the ordinary course of business. If it involves a legal question that I am asked to intervene in, I am confident that not only would Chelsea be protected, but you would do as well.
Especially if the content is something protected, such as negotiations, personnel matters are highly protected, so the content would matter. If it's ordinary business, it would be different than something that would be redacted in a public record request.
So, yeah, that's great. And just follow up on that. The Vermont Supreme Court has made clear on several occasions that one cannot acquire protections where they don't exist simply by putting an attorney's name on the communication. It has to be for a subject that is within the ambit of legal advice. So if you're asking, how much did we spend last year on X? I wouldn't know the answer to that, and it wouldn't be legal advice. If you're asking, what does the budget allow? Or, what do contracts provide for?
I'm thinking about more something along the lines of like, I think I just violated open meeting law. Like, I shouldn't send that to you.
I would say, I would like to talk to our attorney.
All right.
That's what I would do.
You should talk to me also.
Yeah.
Well, but for us as like board members, we're not saying here that we don't have access to you. It's that we want to make that act sufficient. But ultimately, the legal representation is you, not anybody else.
The legal representative is you.
Yeah.
I think what I want to say is, please don't contact Joe with questions that I might know the answer to.
I would know the answers to.
Because we've already paid for that answer, and so, we're not in any budgetary situation to be paying for an answer twice. And if I genuinely don't know, I will ask, and if I do know, I will tell you.
Part of my job is to also have a deep understanding of open meeting law, Robert's Rules of Order, policy governance, which I do, and so, part of my role is to ensure that you all are not inadvertently violating these statutory requirements, and so I'm certainly a resource to you as well.
And the board members can be assured, based upon my experience over a number of years, with superintendents, they don't hesitate to ask, and Violet doesn't hesitate to ask when and if there's any uncertainty. So we'll get you the right answer.
If there's no further questions about that piece, I would like to just quickly show you about policy governance, but in the essence of time, I do think we should discuss like another board training very soon. So I will just quickly share the screen. And what I'd like to do is just show you where you can access information about our policies. So if you go to menu and scroll down to school board, you'll find policy under governance. And clicking right here, policy under governance, these are our policies that we are bound to operate by as a board. And I would love to go in detail about these with you another time. I don't think we have a lot of time tonight. But I also discovered, I did not realize this, on our website, we have frequently asked questions. I think that these were published by a former board under the last superintendent, but I was reading through them and they are really nice, like easy explanations of some of the common questions about what is policy governance, why, how do we use it, particularly like how is the community involved? So I would love to have a larger conversation about policy governance in the future. I think the very basic understanding I'd like to offer you through the trainings that I've gone through and books that I've read is policy governance is like the software on your phone. You don't need to know how the software was written or why, but you need to know how to use it effectively in order to operate your phone and use it as a tool. It is the bicycle that gets us down the road. You don't need to understand how the bicycle was built or made, although it is pretty interesting. But you do need to know how to ride the bicycle to get down the road. So that is policy governance. It is the mechanism by which we can do our work. So any questions about that so far? I mostly just wanted to make sure you knew where you could access the policies, how to read them, and when we say policy governance or policy under governance, what we're talking about.
Those are separate from policies and procedures. Policies and procedures, Chelsea will toggle to. These are operational and educational procedures that often require the expertise of school staff to put together. So for example, we don't expect you to be experts in employment law or in sex-based discrimination, right? You know, so or experts in agency of education requirements, that's my role. So for instance, some of the updated policies I brought forward to you involve Act 39 literacy. I don't expect you to know the numbers, right? Act 29 safety. So when I introduce to you operational policies, they're often with the VSBA model policies, but part of my role is to follow the legislature and ensure that I'm keeping our district in compliance. So you wouldn't be expected to introduce educational policy or information on how to
Well, we wouldn't be expected to know the things that they asked us on town meeting to be like how to deal with neurodiversity. It's our concern, but it's not our expertise. I have a question in general. How do you want us to signal, like we're having discussion? Should we just raise our hand if we want to talk, or how do you want to do that?
In discussion and in we usually operate by Robert's rules for small boards, which is more casual discourse. So there are still Robert's rules and we still need to operate by them. But in my leadership style as a small board chair has been, if you have a question, just be respectful of other people when they're talking, listening, when you have an opportunity to ask. If you feel like your opportunity is being missed, tell me and I'll make sure you have the chance.
Would you prefer if we like literally just gave you like a visual indication and you kind of call on us, or?
I don't want to restrict board conversation. So I would just ask that we all are respectful to each other and don't talk over each other. And listen when you're speaking, but I'm not going to be a stickler about the chair. May I say, you know, we're 6 people, 7 eventually, as our superintendent, our student, that's I think we can be respectful.
So I think you showed us policy under governance and then separately policies and procedures. So like the executive limitations and the ends policy, they don't show up in here.
They require me to do all these things.
Right.
so,
Do they
yes.
have like a separate legal status?
What do you mean? One is articulating my roles, the other is articulating the district's roles and how you monitor my work.
So most of our work at the board level, we are always, whenever an issue is brought to you as a board member, the first thing you should ask yourself is where does this fit under policy monitoring? And I think this is going to be a great place of growth for the board this year in having engaging conversation about monitoring policy in our open meetings. And in order to do that, it requires a board that is well trained on how to monitor policy and how to have these discussions. But if a parent were to come to you and say, I'm really worried about school safety, the first thing you should ask yourself is, when do we monitor the policy that relates to school safety? And when eventually we're gonna set a board work calendar, and in that work calendar, that's when we decide when we're going to monitor all of our policy. We can at any time request that the superintendent provide an update about any of these policies, but it's most, I would say, it is most efficient to give the superintendent our plan for when we're going to monitor those policies so that she can provide input on when some data will be available operationally, and also make sure that the reports are well researched and prepared, given the timeline that we've provided to her about when we expect to monitor any given policy.
If it's time sensitive, as the public comment guidelines, read, which Chelsea, reads at the onset of every meeting. If there's an issue, the board can delegate it to me to address. So for instance, you wouldn't follow up with a school counselor on an issue. I hear that in a board meeting, I take a note, I follow up on it, and then I report, I handle the operational issues, right? So monitoring is something that happens, we do the curriculum report once a year. The question on Honors American that a constituent brought this evening is something operationally we've already, so that's something where I heard the question. We're not going to open up curriculum discussions at a board meeting. This is something operationally I meet with my staff, my team, and I say, great, we're gonna have a community conversation. Please let me know the date, which is how I handle that operationally. So that wouldn't be something where you would follow up individually with the person to provide a solution.
But you can follow up with me or with Violet about making sure that that concern was handled. The other thing I think is important to recognize here is board members are not expected to be curriculum experts or financial experts or legal experts, or we are meant to be representatives of our community, and our community has a wide realm, a wide breadth of knowledge and experience. And when we set up these expectations with our community that board members can weigh in on these, school safety is a great one. I think about the amount of time and effort, and you you're a former police officer, right? I'm sure you can imagine not only how sensitive planning and understanding safety protocols are, but also how much experience you really need to be able to make a policy like that. There should be no expectation that we will always have a board member with that specific experience. And so we delegate making sure that someone with that experience is the one who is doing that operation. And our job as board members is to ensure that it's been done, not to design it. That makes sense. It's certainly helpful when we have curriculum, school safety, financial experience on the board, because it helps inform the discussion. It means that the monitoring and the questions are really rigorous and good. That's great. But just trying to really define that role of board member versus not.
No problem.
Well, I don't know if this is a good time. I was gonna make a suggestion that we all run together. So there's 7 of us, plus Violet, so it's 8. So the accelerator, I don't know if you've heard of it, but that is, it's it's training for policy governance, and it's 8 modules, and they take 20 to 40 minutes to complete. And it's $300 a person. And at the end, the woman who does it will give a 30-minute coaching session to anybody who wants it. But I was thinking this would be a really good idea. We each do a module and then we like set aside 20 minutes during the board to talk about it. That way we are all getting the same information at the same time and talking about it, because this, I actually really like this, Joe, thank you. And it's never enough. It's just something never enough. I've been on this board 2.5 years. I feel like I'm just now starting to get it. So I think the more we can work together, and I love that Valerie and Gracie could do it. Because I think, if just like learning together would be really great. So I don't know, I know there is a cost to it. But honestly, I think that it would be well worth it.
Are you suggesting that we pay one, like for one account and then we each do one module?
No, we would have to, it would be 300, it would be 2,400, well, and then if they wanted to do it. With 300 times 10, right? So. Is that $3,000? So, I do think like at this point, it would be really well worth it since we have so many people.
So, and I'm gonna be candid because I think that's important, that we call it candid. The concept of monitoring is specific. It's not only used by policy governance, but the reason we use the monitoring and we talk about monitoring policies, that's a policy governance decision that we've made. Right, like, there's no law that says the board will, there's other laws that say, the board will make sure that the policies are executed, but, and so like, I think that sort of along the same lines, it's my sense that along the same lines is that, like, we wouldn't be experts in public safety, we wouldn't be experts in curriculum development. Similarly, I'm a little skeptical of the concept that we need to be really, really experts in a specific form of methodology and policy governance. Prioritized over, say, for example, other things that we might spend our energy on, like community outreach and kind of stuff like that. So, maybe this, if it's okay, a question for the superintendent. Can you talk about why monitoring is a good way for us and why you like policy governance, or how do you feel about policy governance?
Yeah, I think policy governance is I would not, I would never agree to work in a community as a superintendent or as an administrator where policy governance wasn't at play. It makes roles and responsibilities very, very clear. And the board determines the rules and they tell me very clearly what I'm responsible for. And I know what and when I need to manage, and the board has I know that the board will hold me accountable. And I think it ensures operational efficiency. It's also a system of checks and balances. So I have colleagues who we never know who's going to be elected to a board, especially in Vermont, where, as you all see, we have sometimes no one running for seats or no one contested, as is the case as we sit here together this evening. And so policy governance ensures that if there is a board member, so you've not only employed me because I've agreed to execute what you're asking. You've also employed me because of my experience, my values, right? So for instance, we in the past have had parents, guardians, community members request that I remove certain pieces of the curriculum referring to Vermont state health standards regarding gender, right? And I, as a superintendent, have said, we will carry on with these standards, and here is why. There are some school boards who may get someone on a school board who says, I would like to remove any curriculum or standards referring to that are in contrast with creationism, right? So it's a safeguard to ensure the system that both your superintendent and the board are not inadvertently due to personal views impacting students or staff negatively. So it both is a system of accountability and of protection, and it ensures that the district will not be harmed by either party.
And so is that to say that like, we don't write, or nor should we be expected to write the policy on like treatment of staff? Is that operational?
That's
So
correct.
all these operational policies, or no, that's an executive limitation.
So I will submit a report to you regarding treatment of students and staff, and I will provide a curriculum report to you. I will provide monitoring reports on all of these, right, so 2.2 treatment of staff, 2.3 treatment of community. And I'll give you a written report and verbal report. And then you will determine whether it is compliant in each area or if it is not compliant. If it is not compliant, and I will tell you when something is not compliant, and in my report, I will detail the compliance plan. For instance, you will find in my reports, I will tell you that in many ways our facilities are, we were out of compliance. In financials, I report annually that we have insufficient funding for future capital project needs. Before we moved to the new financial software, I reported multiple deficiencies in financials.
And so like, let me take us back a couple years when there's a lot, you know. When it came time to write a policy about DEI or something like that, is that something that we're not drafting that?
So I was involved in the development of this, and was one of the co-authors, and what happened is the board felt that it was important to implement an equity policy, and so the superintendent worked with their team in order to bring something forward to the board, and then the board tuned versions of that, weighing in on it in public open meetings.
So did we add it to the ends policy that there should be equitable treatment of people, or
It's
like?
added to our executive. So basically, our ends are what we expect the district to furnish or provide as the entity. And we charge our CEO with getting the means, like making that, achieving those ends. And we monitor how well she's doing that. So equity is within the executive limitations. Basically, we're empowering our CEO to reach those ends however she sees fit with these limitations. That's 2.0. It's our executive limitations. So whatever strategy she deems the best way to meet the ends, that's what we hired her to think about and know with given limitations.
And so we kind of have to decide amongst ourselves, like, do we want to define it in a positive way? And then it goes to the ends, or do we want to define it like this, like in a negative way, and put it in the limits?
That is a really complex legal philosophy question, in my opinion. It's like, do you want to define what you want to have happen or what you don't want to have?
You like the seltzer?
Yeah, please, thank you. I think there's a shorthand way of describing this in that you indicate what the ends you desire to occur. You hire a professional in the form of the superintendent of schools to make sure those ends are met. The superintendent tells you, in the words of former New York Mayor Koch, how am I doing? And you say, we think you're doing okay. We think you could be improving in these areas. We're concerned about this or that. Go back and see how you might manage your staff more effectively to meet those ends. Or you say, boy, you've outdone yourself in this regard, and we can't be more happy. All of that is part of the monitoring responsibility. So in the end, the board sets the policy and determines whether it's being complied with. And that is what the electorate have, voted you in to do. What they haven't voted you in to do is to determine the method and means of accomplishing those ends. The method and means are delegated to your chief executive and her staff. If that's helpful.
Okay, how are we doing? How are we feeling? We do still have, the rest of our meeting. We want to pause here and I think I have, I think we've had some good questions, Joe. I know I asked you to prepare your answers on some common questions that I think board members get. So let me just see if there's any we haven't covered what we have here. How about, how can I communicate on social media? How can I communicate on social media?
So the legal advice is to be careful. Social media is just another form of media in my mind. And the same cautions that I have given you earlier apply there. So if there is a question about the operation of the district that is in your head individually or has come to you from a constituent, I think the approach is through the chair to the superintendent, so that the superintendent can be aware of it and deal with it. Stay the heck away from just, debating, discussing in social media in a way that does not reflect what the board as a board wants to do.
And you include all media into that.
I would, I think that, that it's both an opportunity, but also a danger. And the one thing about good media is that it's insatiable. So, you'll answer one aspect, and there will be a follow-up question, and there will be a follow-up question, and there will be a follow-up question. So going out on your own in that environment is, sailing between the rock and the hard place, really. So I would say the better course of action is to make sure that before you're posting something that represents what the board is doing, why the board's doing it, what the district is doing, why the district's doing it, go through your normal channels. Particularly if you're attempting to speak for the board, you've got problems if you're not, in fact, speaking for the board. So.
Speaking also as a small business owner who's done quite a bit of research about building client bases and things like that, you don't actually own anything you post on a social media site. And so at any time that content could be taken down or taken away from you. And so I personally think it's best practice for us to drive engagement through our website, through email correspondence, through our public meetings, through Front Porch Forum, where we can share. I don't think Front Porch Forum is going anywhere, and also once it's shared to an email, it doesn't really matter if it goes away at that point.
It sounds like we should, we should have a agenda item for social media policy.
I think I'm hoping to suggest that we do more training soon. I love all the questions and the engagement. It really, I think, demonstrates learning and thoughtfulness. I just also want to make sure that we cover what we said we would cover. I just think in terms of community engagement, which I think is something we're all going to be very interested in, typical social media sites, I don't think are really a great idea because we could build a really strong following and then that could vanish. And then how does the community reach us? And I think it's just better to drive that engagement in platforms that we do own, like a website or.
Well, but this is a good I feel like this is an example of where we should say future board meeting, let's warn social media policy, like
review and discussion.
Yeah.
Any other questions about social media for now? Tim, Laura, can I put you on the spot? We did policy governance training at this meeting last year. Anything that you took away from that meeting that you feel like needs to be shared now?
Yeah, I thought it was, I mean, I was relatively new to the board at that time last year. And, you know, haven't been on the board for over a year now. I think two things. I think it's incredibly challenging to operate as a board member under policy governance because you want to act. But I think it puts brakes on your actions that are appropriate. The one area where I potentially would like us to improve a little bit as a board, and this is where I struggle, when we come to the actual monitoring, we often are, on the agenda, we have a policy that we're going to monitor. But I found last year that it was challenging to know exactly what it was I was supposed to be looking at. What does this really mean? So I would recommend it as we move forward and we will pre-build the agenda. I think you will do that, Chelsea, where we will say, we're gonna look at these policies, we're gonna monitor this and that in this month. That we do a little bit of precursor training on that particular monitoring report, so we know what we're looking for and stuff. And then you don't feel as out of touch, because that's what I felt on numerous occasions as I was looking at some of the monitoring reports. And I didn't really know what I was looking for, did I have input into it, right, appropriately, so a little precursor training. But other than that, I've come to respect policy governance because, and the social media policy, I think, is really important, or the approach, because you often want to jump into the defense of something, or you feel you take something personally almost as a board member, but you just kind of learn to, you know, water off a duck's back and just don't engage. So those are my lessons over the last year.
Yeah, I did research like what are some common criticisms of policy governance, because in most of what I can find, it's highly regarded and very popular. One of the criticisms though is high board turnover. And policy governance don't gel well together. And what Tim's speaking about is a perfect example. When you don't have any sort of continuity of board members, it's hard to have any sort of fellow board member support or training as to what it is you're supposed to be doing. And that was certainly my experience joining the board, which is why I've tried pretty hard to find ways to make trainings more applicable and helpful. Because when you don't have someone on the board to say like, hey, this is your first monitoring report, like, let me tell you about last year when we monitored this report and give you some context and tell you what you should be looking for. It's really hard to feel like you're doing your job well, so.
Yeah, and yeah, I would agree. And the other thing is, so the SBA has got great information for new board members, like everybody should go on there. And Chelsea's done training, it is on the South Burlington website. I do want to advocate for like a more formal training, like that rhythmic, like 8 modules, so we all are getting the training, because, you know, maybe, I don't know, Dan's got more time than I do to do that. And I don't know what he's looking at, I don't know what Emily's looking at, and we're all kind of learning at our own pace, but different things. And I just think there's, to bring us together, we do need to gel as a group, which I don't believe that we have done. And I think that will, like, learning together will bring us together. So that would be my thing.
It's a teacher thing to say.
I know, sorry, I know, Ron used to say that to me all the time. Oh my gosh, you're such a teacher. Sorry. I know, next thing I'm gonna make a video.
So do you feel like we've covered everything we outlined?
I think so. Till the point of board of the budget.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the discussion. This feels great. Is there any further discussion about board training at this time? Because if not, we can move on with the rest of our agenda. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate you.
So you'll be in executive session regarding labor relations this evening.
So, okay, well, with that, let's move to agenda item 9 now, discussion items. And up first, we have election and budget results. Who is hoping to share my head? So, Superintendent Nichols is going to share some budget results with us, and then after that, I have a statement I prepared that I'd like to send to the community on our behalf, and I'd just like to read it out for you for any feedback. It should be pretty straightforward. It's just an acknowledgement and thank you for our community.
So our budget passed last night. This is a tremendous victory for our community, for our students, and for our staff. And we came out this year because of the impacts of the education funding formula changes with a 7.93 homestead tax rate increase, and also because of the use of the surplus funds that we allocated to the fiscal year 25 budget, which is our current budget. Because we bought that tax rate down, we also have one of the highest ed spending per pupil. That change in ed spending is driven up. We brought a tremendous ask to our community. Statewide, we saw districts that had 0% increases and many negatives. This was the message that some of you likely heard from the governor, and was also connected to the yield being so high to intentionally, which was a legislative decision, the yield is set by the legislature. And it being so high provided tax relief for communities. So with many of our constituents in the state and certainly in the Champlain Valley, we stuck out among the pack as being the highest. We received a lot of feedback regarding our 14.95 FTE reductions while maintaining a near 8% increase. Many of our neighbors reduced 40 or so FTEs, or discussing closing buildings, or decimating programs such as the arts in total. We did not take that draconian approach. That was not my recommendation to the board, and the board did not impose those limitations on me in budget development either. While Burlington is at -4 and CVSD the same, Colchester at a 3% increase, we were incredibly fortunate to pass a near 8% budget last night. I'm incredibly grateful to all of those who participated in the development process, which was the most robust I've participated in as an administrator or career educator. The amount of detail that was provided in looking at financials, enrollment, student achievement results, survey that we issued to staff and administrative and director feedback, which was gathered by connecting with staffs, yielded a budget that ultimately our community stood behind, for which I'm incredibly grateful. Because of the South Burlington City Charter, we are obligated by law to have a revote within 30 days, which meant that with just the meeting this evening and 12th, that we would have had, you all would have had to approve a budget 1 week from today. So administrators and I have gone through the hard task of being prepared for subsequent votes, and we are absolutely grateful and relieved to maintain the programming that we have this evening. So I really want to thank all those who participated in the budget development process, our administrative team, our directors, our staff, board members, community members. This is something that I view as a team win and a victory, which supports our students, staff, and community. So really happy to be able to share that, and just feel that there's a tremendous amount of support in our community for our schools and for education and the work that we're doing. I chose to work here because I believe that this is the best district in the state, and I stand by that. And I really feel that the community has spoken through their votes and has been willing to pay for that which is an incredible gesture. So great news to report. I do want to, share the disaggregated voting information. So we have about 21,000 residents in our city. 3,601 of them voted, which is about a 20%. This is a standard and typical turnout. We do see increases around presidential elections, which typically are around 5,000. We received 51.76% yes votes and 48.24 no's. We won by 127 votes. And again, I think that this was earned, won, and fought, and our community support has been incredible. Again, we need to contextualize this financial cost, given that many of the residents in our community are on fixed incomes or who are below the poverty line. Albeit there is the poverty forgiveness, that's only issued to about 52% of those in our community. So by district, we see here Chittenden 10, that we received a larger margin of support at nearly 58%. Chittenden 11 here, which you see in this light blue color, again, also a 57% yes vote. In our this almost coral light color here, should use primary colors, right? It would be that's controversial. We received about a 57% support. If you look at Chittenden 8 here, you're seeing that this is one area where we were just under on the yes votes. And then Chittenden 9, we're just over. Last night, as the votes were coming in and the incredible folks at the city were communicating results, they told me that our final district was Chittenden 12. And because I am aware, I understand the voting history of Chittenden 12, that is when I called our board chair crying on the phone, boy, because I know about their historical high support. And that is one of the areas where we receive historically a great deal of support. So, it does take all areas, and, these are, you can tell where the neighborhoods are here, and we've also put the polling places here. So you see, Chittenden 10 is the Chamberlain area. And then we have the middle school, which is 9 and 11, Orchard School, Chittenden 12, and City Hall as well, which is Chittenden 8. I want to provide a huge thank you to those at the city and all those who volunteered at the polls. We as a school district, and not all school districts do this, but we are voting locations. And so when it's on town meeting day, we intentionally don't have school, things run smoothly. Should we have revotes? So I'm around making sure things go operationally smoothly at elections. When there are students in the buildings, things become quite challenging because we are now opening our schools for the only time of year when there are also students in the buildings. So wonderful, professional, accurate, dedicated volunteers who made this possible. And I want to share just a bit more information here about the votes for FY25, which you see are these first three maps, and then you see the fiscal year 26. So we're currently in fiscal year 25. Our fiscal year ends June 30th, 2025. On July 1st, we will start fiscal year 26. And last year, unfortunately, the reason you see three maps here is because we were unsuccessful on our initial town meeting day vote. This is where you see an unprecedented unfolding of legislation pertaining, and then ultimately law pertaining to school budgets after our city charter had required us to adopt and warn budgets. So this first budget, after the board approved and adopted it and warned it, it became what was a 12.5 became a 23.5% budget literally overnight based on law changes. And then, so you see the percentages here, it was a presidential election, so you're at that near 5,000 number for that March 5th, 24 vote. We were 42% yes at that time. For the next budget, we were 48%. Finally, 56.78 on vote 3, which was May 7th. So lovely belated birthday present for me. This was a painful process for our staff. Staff morale is incredibly impacted, which impacts our students and our community significantly. The way that our current teachers collective bargaining agreement is written is that the board must give seniority to the union and then RIF notification, intent to RIF by the 15th of March, and then RIF notices must go out to all staff who could potentially, who will be RIFed. So that doesn't mean that they will be reduced. It means there's a possibility. So what this means is that should the budget have failed last night, we would have been in a position now, because we wouldn't have re-voted before the RIF notification date, that we would have had to RIF for multiple contingency votes, because we could not have, as a district, you all couldn't have approved a budget that would have committed to staffing that the voters would not have approved. So I am so grateful not to be sending RIF letters. This has been a really painful process, and as you heard earlier, because of union negotiated seniority, we are often, and we've discussed this publicly in board meetings throughout the budget process, often those impacted are hires through the district's DEI efforts. So here we are today. I stand here with a tremendous amount of gratitude. This was the, blood, sweat, and tears of many, and right up to the end, our students standing out at the polling locations, the honk and wave, board members doing community engagement in folks' living rooms, the calls, the emails, the conversations in the grocery store. And ultimately, again, the community sending the powerful message that they're supporting our schools, our kids, and our staff with this significant financial ask is not one that I take for granted or take lightly anyway.
Can I ask, do you know about how many intent to references you had to send out budget?
Well, the board would give guidance on parameters in a revote. Conversation would have happened publicly this evening. I would have asked you explicitly for feedback on big buckets, right? So the board would advise on, we would like to see changes in major structures or major things such as facilities. Would you have said, and this is a real example because that's what the board said to me last year, take out the future facilities savings. So the board would weigh in on priorities, and those would be reflected financially. The board might say things like, make reductions in arts, administration, whatever the big category is. And I would have asked for, guidance on not only programmatically, but financially. So when administrators and directors and I were meeting, we had planned I had given our administrators targets to achieve of 3%, thinking that things couldn't possibly get any worse than that. That wouldn't mean we would have gone out with it. It meant that the teams needed to be prepared, and we needed to, it takes time to develop a budget. So there would have been, and I calculated that based on budgets in our area. So it wasn't a number that I picked out of a hat. I'm looking at what districts are aiming for. And again, 3% sticks out amongst the negative scores in our region. But it was a number that I felt like we couldn't, to go below where we are has been scary to think about. So with that, the reductions would have been significant. We have not quantified the number of RIF letters. There is also in the agreement here, which is somewhat unique, is that there is a displacement process. So if a teacher has a license in they have a science endorsement and a math and a multilingual endorsement. They could then displace someone in science or in math or in a multilingual teacher. So they also, then they have several days to respond to the displacement letter indicating whether they will or won't. Then someone else could get the letter down the line. This is something that is particularly bad for staff morale because someone could be getting a RIF letter not on March 30th, but you know, April, May. And so we don't always know which staff is going to be impacted, right? Like you heard this evening from a staff member who knows that they're the lowest seniority in that category. But there's that's not something that we know ultimately until folks have decided to displace or not. So I just wanted to share the brief results, mostly to share a big thank you, incredible amount of gratitude, and to the board members who endured this process. You know, being a board member is you're giving a tremendous amount of your life and your time and your energy and your reputation, and you know, I think it's very clear to say that the discussion is not always civil, and in fact, you know, in fact, I'll go so far as to say that, you know, this was there was quite a lot of behavior exhibited that was very cruel. And so I want to thank our board members who were steadfast in enduring this. I will add one final note. Part of implementing the financial software, which I did, allowed us to have a lot of much greater controls on pinpointing and developing metrics for budgeting, in my opinion, in a responsible way. So I've engaged with Tassant consulting partners who develop school budgets for districts using a number of metrics. They engaged with the Burlington School District 4 years ago. I have met with, I've reviewed the Burlington budgets and their plan, and you can see things like for elementary schools in, for ages 3 to 5, there is an average of X number of dollars per student, and it's across all the schools, right? And so it's a way that we are really drilling down into data to make decisions. Tassant also, not only will they manipulate finances, but they engage in a significant amount of community engagement, which is really important. I think the board and I have different perspectives on feedback for the process of budget development. This boardroom was primarily staff members. There were very few community members who provided feedback on positions specifically. But in the community, there were a lot of folks who provided feedback on cost specifically. And so the idea that and 80% of those who in our community of our 21,000 residents do not in fact have ties to the schools. So it's again, we're not only seeking to we're seeking to support our students and our staff, but through the values and the eyes of many different constituents. So I've engaged in conversations with Tassant, and they do not only the financial piece, but they also support engagement. So I wanted to share that this evening because I think it's a step in the right direction. This is not something that I've executed yet. It is an operational decision, and it's not something that would require either a bid or board approval. But I do value the effort of the board.
So while it's not budgeted though, right? So how, like, where would this, because honestly, I think our training really would be, and it's so much less expensive. I guess I don't,
Yep, so we have a
Confused.
great question. So we have a $71.5 million budget. And the total cost of this is depending on two routes. It's either 58,000 or 70,000. 70 includes significant engagement with constituents. And in the budget, board through monitoring holds me and through financial reporting, it is my responsibility to ensure that we do not exceed the number of FTEs the board approves or the number of financials, so a dollar amount for the budget. So should the year progress and we have consistent vacancies in positions, I can evaluate and reallocate money for things like, $58,000 for Toussaint. Should that be, a priority? And I mentioned this because process was something that was discussed. And so it would certainly provide an additional level of expertise, communication and evaluation.
So, for a sec, so
Sure.
that is to say that there is no executive limitation that says you can't reallocate or something like that, like, in this case, you're saying, take budget from FTEs that weren't filled, put it into the software and consulting. And so that's why,
Right, so 2.4 financial monitoring says, don't go into a deficit, don't hire more staff than we've approved. The other thing with staffing, we can set operational controls, which I do annually, and I can say things like, we won't be hiring above a master's 3, step 5, right? Because we need to, and the way that I monitor that is I look at, I prepare for you hire reports. And
Yeah.
I prepare for you reports on hires, and so I monitor, do we have folks who are retiring? And are the folks that we are attracting of higher or lower cost, right? So I hold the principals responsible, I give you hiring reports. The point is, in a $71.5 million, I would not feel concerned about a 50, let alone a $70,000 expenditure. That's not to say that I spend district funds willy-nilly, but it is to say that due to the nature of even our current hiring, that this is something that would not, it would not flag for me as putting us at risk for a deficit.
Just make one comment on the election results. As you were showing the graphic, Violet, with 3 budgets last year, budget votes, I just want to share with the board that I'm very grateful the budget passed the first time, because so last year we were consumed for upwards of 6 months with nothing but the budget. And I don't think, I think it put us behind as a board, dealing with a lot of stuff that we really needed to focus on. And of course, we were a smaller board at the time. So I'm very grateful the community supported the budget. And as I looked at that graphic and realized the last date was May 7th, when we passed the budget finally, that was a huge amount of just energy that went into that month over month for all of us. So
Not to mention, we had to appoint a new board member, and then shortly after that, the board member moved away, and so we had to appoint another board member.
so we're grateful for everybody on the board now. So
If I can make a comment on the budget, if you look at it passed by less than 2% with a very low turnout. And if you look at, in comparison to some of the other districts in the area, where they either saw a reduction in their tax liability, responsibility, or something closer to level of inflation, they passed by a much larger margin. So what I would hope is that please don't take away that, oh, the budget passed. We need to be more responsible and get budgets closer to the rate of inflation. Because this budget, it's a little over 7%, which is more than double the pace of inflation right now. The increase in per pupil spending was close to 16%.
That's factoring in surplus. So it's a complicated, it's not I would caution against thinking it's as simple as rating with inflation. Because there's a lot of other factors that really drive those numbers by a large margin.
Okay, but it was something that was.
I think.
I
the thing you're
hesitate to
saying-
use words
We haven't won
significantly.
this argument.
It outpaced.
In the sense, you like with the community, and I think that's why I was looking to hear the message that you wanted to share with the community, because I want, from my perspective, I want to hear it, and then I want to make sure that we're as a board not coming across as like having won a victory over 49%. You know,
It outpaced inflation, the per pupil spending more than. Or at a greater rate than the budget outpaced inflation. And as Chelsea said, or I'm sorry, as Violet said, there are districts that. Are struggling financially. And you can't keep outpacing inflation at a great rate. Without the whole thing just imploding at some point in the future. You have to get closer to the rate of inflation because most people don't see a 7% raise each year. So we need to be, as a board, more responsible and start looking at getting things closer to the rate of inflation.
And I would also argue that we lobby, one of the reasons that school budgets are so expensive is that we are asked to do things that really society should be taking care of, like mental health. And so school budget, we pay so much money monthly, every district does. And that is something that Governor Scott, they capped the mental health spending on that agency, so it's fallen to schools. And so, there's a lot of things that schools do that have nothing to do with education. I don't think people quite understand that. And that is what drives the cost. The other thing is teacher healthcare. We have no control.
I understand we have no control.
So
over
that's,
teacher healthcare, but
so, yeah, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of things happening in schools that we have to do because society isn't doing it.
The healthcare cost of the district paid in 2024, which is the last year that I have actuals on, was about 8.5 million. Healthcare was a 12% increase this year, 11.99 for the district. And it's negotiated at a statewide level between the Vermont National, the NEA, so the National Education Association and the School Board Association. Just information for folks to understand.
and could we go back, so is the message that you had something that you were gonna propose that like we say as a board?
Yeah, so standardly, when I craft, sometimes I delegate to other board members to craft a statement on behalf of the board if I feel another board member has a really good place on how the board is feeling, but typically I will craft a statement on behalf of the board and send it to myself with the full board line copied and ask for your feedback. And then I'll collect your feedback and try to incorporate it into a new draft, and I'll send that new draft. And that is how board statements are typically crafted, especially when it's between meetings and we can't just, it's also like a little, right. It's also like a little awkward right in this moment, because my hope is that as a board, we can express a statement, a message to our community, but we haven't had a chance to have discussion to inform the statement that I prepared in this board. It's just the nature of the budget night and we have new board members today. So in anticipation of this meeting, I prepared a brief statement that I'd like to share with all of you, get your feedback. And if you're all amenable to it, I would like to post it on our website, post it on Front Porch Forum, and also just read it out now in this public meeting, if that's
Could we read it out now as a provisional, kind of just a discussion item before we adopt it?
Are we ready for that part? All right. As members of the South Burlington School Board, we want to express our sincere gratitude to all community members who participated in the vote on our school budget. We recognize that this was a significant decision for our community, and we deeply appreciate the support that allowed it to pass. At the same time, we acknowledge the concerns and perspectives shared throughout this process. As we move forward together, we want to assure you that every email sent, every conversation held, every article written, and every public comment shared over the past several months has been heard and will continue to inform our work in the year ahead. This budget represents an investment in our schools, our students, and the future of our community. We know that challenges lie ahead, and we do not take lightly the responsibility that comes with this support. The board is committed to strengthening community connections, fostering open and productive dialogue, and working collaboratively to find thoughtful and sustainable solutions. Our goal remains clear: to ensure that South Burlington schools remain strong, vibrant, and positioned to serve our students and community for generations to come. Thank you for your engagement, your trust, and your commitment to the success of our schools.
Thank you for writing it. Hard thing to try to crystallize what you think a bunch of people are gonna agree to. What?
Right. There won't be agreement. My
Right.
intention, whenever I try to write a statement on behalf of the board, is to, I hope, represent the positions of everyone on the board. We do speak as one voice, and sometimes we really don't agree, but ultimately, when we don't agree, we take a vote, and however the vote is, that is the board's position. So I tried to craft something that acknowledged the difficult position many of our voters were in, and was grateful and thankful to our community for passing the budget. And I tried to be clear about our intentions moving forward and the responsibility that we have in the next year as we, I don't think anything is gonna get easier, so.
My feedback, just, the key points on it, I think, are more. They're less about which direction I think spending should go or something like that. I think that, I think as Dan brings up, like, we haven't won the argument in terms of like funding, in terms of like. Anything really, like, we haven't won the argument, and I think that turnout would affect the way that the budget would go. And so, that's number one, is we haven't won the argument, so whatever we say as a board, I think, should reflect that, that we need to keep having, an argument and then the other thing is that I think that one of the most, one of the things that we have to be most, one of the things that hurts our standing the most is a feeling of opacity and a feeling of like, where we're kind of like doing things, you know, it's like in community members often say the word transparency, right? They want transparency, they want transparency. And then we flip that around and we look and we say, well, we sent you all the numbers. But I think that we need to, again, I would suggest that in our response, we talk about our commitment to like ourselves being less opaque. And I mean, and again, like we've tried to be open, we've tried to bring community in to, you know, like have listening sessions and stuff like that. But if it's not working, we need to try something else. And so I would feel that like we should. And the third thing I'll mention, I think also, is that this political moment right now, a lot of the people who wouldn't necessarily support a school budget out of their own interests or out of their own beliefs, I think are pretty resistant to hearing from like officials, like official talk, official, like kind of like officious language. And so I think that we should consider put together a statement that we want to reach people who are, you know, like in this moment right now. So I'm not sure how we can craft a statement. I can see the urgency of it, but I think it is, you know, 51 to 49 is pretty polarized, 52 to 48 or, you know, whatever. And so we have to, I think, try to get more of that 48, you know, and especially if we want capital improvements, if we want to bring schools into compliance, that's going to bring out the whole community. And if history tells us, whether it's the March 5th, 2024 vote or the 2019 vote, where it was 6,400 to 1,700, we have our work cut out for us for the next year. And so we can start early by really trying to recognize how we have to be more actively transparent and stuff. So as a parent, I support obviously spending money, but then my neighbor down the way, you know, he doesn't have kids. And we're both in the same taxpayer voters, you know, we're both the same community, so.
I think from my perspective, going into this is now starting my 4th year. I've done 3 full years. I think that having an engaged board at the table to have robust discussion about the information that the board has been consuming in the past is I think a really important missing link in that transparency. And I think, speaking on behalf of myself, the efforts that I've put in to try to, as you say, like hold listening sessions, listen to the numbers, it's not working. And so I've been really trying to brainstorm and think about ways where in this format, in our business meeting, where it's appropriate for discussion, how do we show our community the rigorous evaluating, monitoring that we're doing? And part of that is having board members trained on how to do it. So the training is important and the work is important. There's one, we had a former board member make a comment who said, you're not doing the district or the superintendent any good by not, you know, I don't want to misquote, so I'm not quoting, but paraphrasing, you're not doing anyone any good by not having this like rigorous evaluation and monitoring in your open session, and I have to agree. And I think that's the piece that's been missing. So I'm looking forward to having,
It's not the only piece.
but I think it's a really important piece that it's just not been well translated. So I'm hoping as your chair to focus our meetings to these really important discussions and less of the distracting stuff or just like, I mean, I don't want to color other important things, but focused on the work and not onboarding and appointing and revoting and.
That's what a lot of our times. And I would like to call for the orders of the day. I'm wondering, Chelsea, can we put these other things on hold and go?
Yeah, can we just get, can I just hear from board members about, I know you can't look at it, I would email it to you, but I don't know if you have your emails working yet. The statement that I just read, is that palatable to the board?
So I like this statement. I feel like I'm behind all the things that was written there. I understand what James is saying, and one way that I was thinking maybe could be conveyed is that what you just said, it's not working. We're not getting through somehow. And so the board might be committed to finding out other ways to communicate with the community and help them to understand what we're trying to convey, because we can acknowledge that the current steps aren't necessarily working as well as
Sorry.
I'm done.
I mean, you mentioned in there about our responsibility. The one thing I don't think I heard, if it's in there and I didn't hear it, I apologize. Fiscal responsibility. And trying to get things closer to what most people experience. Like I said, most people didn't get a 7% raise last year. So.
I'm just gonna push back on that, Dan, because I don't think with this kind of a letter, we want to commit ourselves to some sort of financial commitment, right? I understand exactly
I'm
what you're
not saying a specific number. I'm saying that we need to acknowledge that part of our job is to be fiscally responsible and trying to keep things more in line with what the average person experiences.
And that's where I disagree, because I think if we say we're going to try to keep things more in line with the average person, that's almost an economic commitment ahead of time.
But that's also politics.
But it's not saying we will, it's we will try.
Would it be appropriate? Well, would it be appropriate if we came maybe in 2 weeks with, you know, our own thoughts on what the letter should be, and that, or maybe we could send them around earlier, but we can't talk about it for 2 weeks. Is it too long? You want to put?
This is like the awkward part of trying to have a statement that has board support less than 24 hours from the budget passing, because this could have been a very different letter, right? So perhaps what we do is reframe the purpose of this letter, which I think is to acknowledge and thank our community for the support that we received. And
But only 51% gave support.
But that's still 51% who gave support. I'm acknowledging and grateful for that support that we received, while also maintaining and committing to working harder and better to reach the constituents who voted no. And I want to know more about why. I want to know more about no is a very valid thing to vote, right? That those are your choices, yes or no. And so it's not like, I want to really steer very clear of any sort of implication that anyone who voted no on the budget did something wrong. And I want this letter to reflect the very difficult position that our no voters were put in. And I would appreciate this board making the commitment to trying to do better, always do better, always improving.
Well, you can.
But are you saying, I'm sorry, from a process point of view, are you saying that you'd like to vote on this tonight? Because if we don't vote on it tonight, we'll have to wait 2 weeks before we put on a statement?
We don't vote on statements. It's more, I'm the chairperson, I'm the spokesperson of the board, and it's my responsibility to inform you what I'm saying on your behalf, and also make sure I have your support with what I'm saying on your behalf. And standardly, I would craft something like this, and I would email it to all of you and would collect your feedback and try to draft something that I feel represents the board the best that it can, and then put it out there. It doesn't require a formal vote.
Okay.
I think with this one specifically, I would like timely communication from the board because the vote did happen last night. I don't love the optics for our community of waiting 2 weeks to.
Well, we don't have to vote on it, so we don't need to wait 2 weeks.
Sure, I guess I'm just saying, can we simplify the purpose of this statement? It's really just to acknowledge and be grateful and commit to what we would like to commit to. But it's clear that we have, we're not in total agreement. So how do we simplify this to still achieve the purpose of acknowledging to our community that the vote happened, budget passed?
You know, like Shayma said, you know, it's less than 2%, so you have to acknowledge both. This wasn't anywhere near a landslide, and you can pretty much guarantee that anybody voted no. They voted no, not because, well, I want them to spend more money, because I can guarantee there's never been a budget that was shot down where you came back with a second vote where you increased what you're spending. So that 48.24% or whatever it was, they voted no because they think the budget's too.
Dan, do you think you could write that in something like I could commit to writing something tomorrow? You could probably commit to writing something sometime, and then we could at least give you that written, like, this is what I would say if I was the spokesperson. I feel like that's the most efficient thing for us to do now is for us. I don't necessarily want to tell you all the edits I would make to that. Say, this is what I would write if I was gonna say something.
And most schools have their thank yous already on. And they've already acknowledged that, thank you for voting, and we do acknowledge the challenges that people were up against. I think like.
But the urgency there is not necessarily politically advantageous to the board.
Well, I think like you need to acknowledge what's just happened.
This is also
And
just one statement.
It's just
not-
one,
we're not,
it's
this
not like.
isn't-
I think it sets I think, I'm not, I don't wanna be pressured. If the board speaks as one voice, I think we can't be pressured into, I mean, it's not even pressure. I'm just saying, like, give us a day, to write an alternate, and then together, like, at least then we would have other texts to look at, Because what I want to do, again, my priority is support for this board.
I stand that we will not pressure you to make a decision quickly, and in fact, I think that the board should not be really, really quick to answer anything. We should be thoughtful and take time to form full opinions. I guess I felt in this case, it's the purpose of what I'm trying to write is meant to be a very simple acknowledgement that the vote is concluded, the budget passed. Thank you for the support that we did receive. If the commitment of what we need to do moving forward is asking too much, I'm happy to remove that. But to the 51% who said yes, to not thank them for that support, I have a problem with. I want to acknowledge the people who did not support this budget, but I also feel.
But those same people those 51% who supported it, that you want to acknowledge, they won't withdraw their support if you don't acknowledge them within 24 hours.
I just feel it's disrespectful not to encourage them.
But it may be disrespectful, but it may end up being more politically costly.
So I'm just, can I, if I may say something? This should be a very simple thank you. We passed, budget passed. We appreciate everybody who voted. I would not put in there any implication that, hey, this was a really high budget and next time we're gonna make it lower, right? You want to avoid anything like that. It's really just a thank you. So this is where, Dan, I understand what you're saying, but I think if you put in there something about, hey, we recognize that we can do better financially, what you're really saying there, that message is, we put forward a budget that we knew was
I
financial.
didn't say it like.
That's, we gotta.
Well, that's why I think you
I
should
just
write
want to be
something
careful
down.
of the potential.
And I
message that
understand
comes
that
through, so.
It can be sensitive how. it's
Right,
worded.
so,
But you have a really close vote. I understand you want to get this out and thank the people that supported the budget. But because it's so close, there needs to be some acknowledgement to the people who didn't support it. That we will, and
May I reread the part that I
Sure.
intended to
But
acknowledge?
I'm sorry, I don't think that the end result of this is that. I think, is there any problem with us saying, let's wait until tomorrow? Okay, so maybe we should just wait until tomorrow and let Dan write something, let anybody else who wants to write something, Emily, Laura, like anybody, and then we submit it to you and then you can look at them. And at least then you'll know what I'm talking about.
My experience as chair is it will not. We will be much more.
I mean, I'm
So-
fine.
They
if
take
you put a
a break,
deadline on it. I mean,
guys. yeah,
So I guess,
I might be going home and writing something tonight.
so I guess my retort to that, Seamus, given that I do think the general feeling of the board is a timely statement to the community. I would put a deadline out of by end of day tomorrow.
Oh, sure, I'm
And
totally comfortable with that.
If I
Yes.
don't hear anything, I'll move forward with this draft. The thing is, though, whatever you submit, I will then try to incorporate that and send it to the full board and need response from the full board and it starts to be these email deadlines, and I'm not sure that you all even
But
have your emails.
But urgency versus importance is very important that this elected representative body represent more than 51.7. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that is the important thing. And the urgency of responding to a vote within 24 hours, within 48 hours is just not, in my opinion, the same. Urgency and importance are different things.
I just want to say, I heard you acknowledging both sides of the yes votes and the no votes. I'm not quite certain what, how it hasn't been acknowledged that thank you and we hear you who didn't vote.
Because people may not like being addressed in that language.
That's an interesting point. I didn't hear any language that was offensive, so I understand what you're saying and how you might have a perspective that it has language that would be more able to absorb and hear. So I like the idea of taking time to hear what you have to say, but I do also agree that I would like it to be going out in a timely manner. So
This is a point of clarity regarding open meeting law. If Chelsea received individual feedback from you all directly to her, and it was not collaborative among other board members, that would in fact not be an open meeting law violation. I just wanted to state that explicitly. Might I suggest as a way forward, because I acknowledge that here's the penny pincher in me, I reminded that Mr. McNeil is here. I would propose that the board agree to send feedback directly to the chair and move to item 13A.
Yes, I would agree. That's a really good idea.
So then just generally, I really want to know that your emails are already up and functioning and working, because I would like to email this draft to.
The email addresses have been created and the listserv is accurate with everyone's information. However, not every board member has been sworn in. And, several folks just got devices, so.
perhaps after the meeting, I can make sure all of you have my cell phone number. That way you can let me know that you are able to access your email. Because sometimes I will take no response as you don't have any feedback. You don't, like, I don't have the expectation that you're going to email everything that I send, got it, understood, I'm all set, you know. So I'll make sure all of you have my cell phone number so that you can confirm to me that your email is working. I will send this draft and seek feedback. In the event that your emails aren't working, perhaps by the end of day Friday. And then perhaps by Monday, I will be able to find a draft that's favorable to the full board and be able to.
They're all in.
Our emails exist.
Yeah, they are.
And also,
they are-
can you access?
And
it?
so, yeah, I
I can
commit to
access.
opening, to creating my email account tonight when I get
Yeah,
home.
and Jen Lawrence is in, so everybody's in.
Okay.
Okay, Jen is not sworn in though, and so she cannot be a part of any board
Right,
business
that's right.
until she is sworn in. So the board, is unable to, communicate with any member of the community who's not been sworn in until such time that they have been.
Yeah, okay.
So we have a school board retreat and public comment warrant for discussion, and we have a 3-hour work session scheduled for March 12th, which really was there in the event that the budget didn't pass as an opportunity to work on the budget. I'd like to propose that we still meet on the 12th, but have it be still more of an onboarding retreat style, or not retreat style, but training meeting. Hopefully our 7th board member would be able to attend at that time. We could continue these discussions. Public comments, monitoring policy governance, is that?
That's great.
So would we cover public comment, board retreat?
Yeah.
And what were the other?
Monitoring, so what we have an agenda item, 12, where we set the agendas for future. And so at that time, that's an opportunity for board members to let me know what they'd like to see on the agenda. You can also email me anytime. We typically warn agendas Friday before the meeting. So in this case, our March 12th agenda will need to be warned by Friday. So any topics that you want to see on the agenda, you would need to email that to me before Friday would be good, because usually it's warned.
By Wednesday is the deadline that we typically give, because it takes our teams time to develop the agendas, and then we have to also physically post to them. So posting often starts sometimes Thursday afternoon on the way home, you know, depending on, what's being driven by.
I think in this case, it should be a pretty simple agenda because it's not set for regular business, it's set to be a work session, so. And we could leave it fairly general in like training, so that the community can expect we're gonna be covering training topics. And that way, if there's like a certain aspect of training that you want to bring up, I think that would be okay.
I think I would suggest the language, board member onboarding roles and responsibilities, policy governance,
Public comments.
open meeting law. Are you gonna deliver the training?
I think we need to have a discussion about what sort of training we would like to pursue.
The tricky thing is it's a week from today, so there isn't.
I think there's plenty of onboarding training and discussion to be had outside of policy governance, and perhaps at our meeting next week, we could discuss what sort of policy governance training we think is needed, appropriate, financially responsible. I provided the training last year because I've done so much.
Nope.
I have been the recipient of a lot of training in my first 2 years, and I've done a lot of personal research on this. And so I thought I could give a basic training that would be appropriate at no cost to the district. But if the board feels we need to spend resources, of course, that's up for discussion. So
For the 12th, sorry,
right, so for the 12th, I could provide a policy governance training if you'd like. I have one prepared, but I also would be open to the discussion of what sort of training do you think is appropriate? And maybe you don't want it to come to me,
No,
maybe you want it to come.
I'll send you some info and then.
One item I would like to add explicitly is our conflict of interest policy, and you may need to follow up with Joe. I know that the state, January 1st, 2025, the new conflict of interest state level policy was implemented. I don't know if it supersedes ours and we have to rewrite it, but that would be something I think we need to.
So
you would
you're
speak to
my
that?
literal blood pressure medication,
So-
Joe McNeil.
So Chelsea, I don't know if this is the time, but I'm just wondering about our climate survey. I mean, given like the budget, like Violet was mentioning, it's been really hard on staff. I would like to know how you're feeling, like I know the union's done listening sessions. I would like to know, like, what are the results of these? Like, how are people feeling? I don't know if that this is the place to ask that, but
We could add that as a topic.
I just would like, just to think, just to understand.
I think
Because, just. There are constituents really, so we need to know. How everyone,
Well, it's where we're starting from and where we might want to
Yeah,
go to.
I mean, because that's part of like, we want our staff to be. To feel positive about coming, and that does have an impact on the children, so that's, it's just something that worries me.
What policy does that fall under, by the way?
Excellent training, Seamus. I want to be clear, are you asking about a staff climate survey or for a community?
I know, I did kind of, I realized I was
Yeah,
asking.
constituents, that's pretty good. We work with the people,
Yeah, no,
not just. the-
No, I understand that. I'm really thinking about like teachers and staff, because Violet mentioned, like, this process has been pretty.
What policy would that fall under?
That would fall under treatment of staff.
Yeah, treatment of staff.
Treatment students, that was,
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just something,
so discussion of treatment students and staff would be a policy. And the agenda.
So just to be clear, the board would not conduct a survey of the staff. That would be, we would ask our superintendent to provide information about how staff morale is under.
So can we talk about that next time, or talk about the
Well, I want-
policy and then give
Yeah, I want to make
the
sure that I
superintendent as much
understand
time
what-
as she needs?
Got that training on that policy.
what Laura is asking.
Right.
In our last board work plan, we discussed treatment of staff in April, so that would be coming up. And in treatment of staff 2.2, the superintendent shall not fail to create a positive organizational climate conducive to achievement of the ends. So she will provide information in her monitoring report with evidence to that end.
And so I would provide the panorama. So we implemented the panorama survey, and that's a tool that I use to measure student and staff metrics. And so that's where I would report out to the board and the community on those. That is the survey that the district uses with staff several times a year.
What a great actual example for it. I love that, really good.
So would you just repeat back the explicit agenda items you have for next week?
Yes, so next week, what I'm hearing is conflict of interest policy review. And then I was gonna leave the training topics relatively general so that you have the opportunity to come with, given that we need to warn this agenda in 2 days. So public comment discussion, policy governance, perhaps training discussion, but also some training, like general training. Like I would love for you to have your own copies of this and be able to, we can go through and I can highlight some things that I think are particularly relevant. Monitoring reports, what else?
I think school or board retreat was on this agenda. And we could, I don't know if we want to talk about that next week or push it by one, but
I think next week,
yeah, I'd love to talk.
because I think the sooner the better.
Dates are, the discussion, planning a meeting is also not a violation of open meeting law. So you could select the date via email.
Can I just ask? Would you be satisfied with your climate survey discussion question being addressed when we monitor 2.2?
Yeah, okay, we can do that.
To get ahead of that though, because we don't wanna make the superintendent do work twice.
That's what I'm saying. She's just gonna do it the one.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is maybe it would be good if next week or whatever, the 12th, we talked about what you wanted to see. In, in your monitoring of that policy, give the superintendent a little bit of guidance on like, well, in the monitoring, I have these particular questions, just so we don't have to do it twice. It seems to me like it's not a bad idea to talk about next week, not the actual results.
Maybe what I could do is make sure the board has the monitoring report from last year. That way you
Yeah,
have
that's great.
information about what sort of evidence that the superintendent furnishes.
And then if that's not what you
Yeah.
think is in there, you say you can have a couple extra weeks.
Anything else for next week's meeting?
And then can we talk about social media policy sometime, not next week, but maybe. Okay, it's not next week, so
Could be.
I think it's too big of a topic.
Okay. I mean, it certainly could be a topic of, our code of conduct and open meeting law. I think social media it is fraught with traps for well-intentioned board members. So I guess if you don't want to talk about it next week, I would just say maybe don't post on social media until you have a really firm idea in your mind of your responsibilities as a board member.
Not just social media, in general. Community, like the other paper is an example, right? So, I will add the the 25-26 calendar on for the 19th.
Okay.
Is it past your it's past my bedtime?
Sorry. I just want to make sure, are we all set with moving our other discussion items to next, like, they both would be covered in next week, school board retreat and public comment. So we're not gonna get into that right now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Which brings us to agenda item 10, reports by the board, recent or planned community engagement activities. This is typically when the board members report out to the full board any community engagement activities that they have done, how they've gone, what they have to share. Or it's a time that we plan to engage with the community.
I would say we put that next week too. We have ideas. That's another big topic, is what Seamus was saying, like, just. Joe is here.
I'm fine moving it up.
Yeah.
Do we have a city school? I mean, we just had a steering committee meeting.
I think we go right to 14.
All right, we have a placeholder for a brief recess as agenda item 11. However, I will say the next two agenda items tend to go fairly quickly, and we've already done most of agenda planning. So, would you like to take a recess? Or would you like to just move right through? Okay. Brings us to agenda item 12, agenda planning. We have discussed the March 12th agenda. We'll have the opportunity on the 12th to discuss the agenda for the 19th. For the 19th, we already have board work calendar, our annual work plan. That's when we decide what policies we'll monitor and when. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add to the 19th that you know of right now? And please know you have plenty of time to add things you don't have to know right now.
Only thing, I'm just wondering if we can do a placeholder on an update about what's happening at the state level.
Sure.
Yeah, just as a placeholder for right now, not that we may have a lot, but I think it's
Oh.
important that we as a board try to stay apprised of what the state is doing.
Bridget Burkhardt, it is a wonderful, next time, I wonder if we could invite her to
Yeah.
connect with us at that time. I think it's a great way to engage with legislators. And she's, dialed in being, on the ways and means debate.
Well, we also, during public comment, said we would add, board member introductions for March 12th. I'm just noting that we did that. My thought is plan to share with the community a little bit about yourself, why you're motivated to run for the board, what experience you have that might be relevant. If you need
But isn't the answer to that question none?
none,
The only possible experience we could have for the board is governance. Because nothing, that we're not bringing anything in terms of, you know, like if I knew something about how to, I'm just saying, it's an interesting.
I guess.
You know, my only qualification is person, citizen,
Got it.
right?
South Burlington citizen. Okay. Any future agenda items or parking lot? That brings us to agenda item 13, consent agenda. More recently, I have asked if there are any questions about anything on the consent agenda, and if I see none, I will say the agenda items are approved by consent. They include approval of minutes, and the expectation is that you will read through the minutes of the prior meeting and agree to it. And then if there's an acknowledgement of hires, resignations, retirements, leaves of absence. There's also AP orders, which I think we should go over what a board member's responsibility is in reviewing AP orders. Next
week.
It's accounts payable.
Yes, accounts payable. And then there's board approval is required to disperse checks in the amount of 50,000 or more. And so we'll commonly see checks that require board approval to send them. So that's what you'll typically see on the consent agenda, including bids also on usually facilities upgrades or
Anything over $40,000.
anything over 40,000.
That isn't, it did, and it, there are certain exemptions to bids, for instance, the Tassans, that we discussed. These are competitive bids such as the boiler replacement at Chamberlain, to ensure that pricing where there are competitive situations is that we're putting out a bid for a process and selecting someone with the best pricing and availability that just the project.
So with that framework, are there any questions about any of the items on the consent
It's on your bid paperwork, Violet. I don't think All Seasons Excavating wants to put the boiler in.
Yeah, that was. One firm responded and it worked.
Just want to note that, so
I'll get.
I have no problem with the bid. I just think they want to update the,
I did, I saw that.
Definitely.
I just figured.
Yeah, sorry, the
nope.
wrong item there.
I was gonna ask you one question about one of the AP orders, but it was for University of Vermont. There was an acronym. My wife happens to work at UVM and she told me, so I said, I should just ask Violet anyways.
Acronyms are my
To see if I
favorite.
could
All right,
win.
what is it?
It was University of Vermont CLCI. Okay, we'll see if I win AP.
Tell me where it's on order.
It was order 1337.
call this EP order?
I love Jeopardy, and I know where the money goes, so this is the game that I enjoy playing. What's the voucher?
I think the voucher was 1337, I think. I can get into it.
I won't take the time to do this now, but I'm gonna get back down and look this up and get back to you.
Are you exercising oversight of,
So I typically with the AP orders, I will read through them all, and if there's one I don't understand, I will ask, and I just keep a running record of that.
And I rarely get
And
stumped
she
here.
gets them right all the time,
Sort of a
but,
game now. Some the superintendent.
but I got the download from my wife, so it's just.
I think it's a
It hasn't happened yet.
Medicaid reimbursement.
I think he's-
I think it was professional education services, that was the category.
All right, I'm gonna look at the order. You stumped me on day one.
Jim, you did it.
I know, you did it.
I never win.
I know. This could be your first victory. Four zeros.
That's first.
it helps build our legitimacy, so.
Yes.
Okay, any further questions about any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none with that, typo change added, the consent agenda items are approved. All right, that brings us to agenda item 14, which is executive session. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session under 1 Vermont statutes annotated section 313 subsection A for the purpose of discussion, the purpose of discussing negotiations and not to do so in executive session with the district at a clear disadvantage?
May I interject? Joe, we are not aware of any real or perceived conflicts with board members who've just been elected.
None that have been called to my attention that I'm aware of.
Should,
I'm going to formally recuse myself. from
Just for training purposes also,
negotiations.
in executive session motions, after I state explicitly who will be going to session, so for the minutes, it's clear who went in, and that way any board members who are recused from negotiations, they're stated in the minutes as not entering, and then we also keep executive session minutes that include who was there, what topic was discussed at what time, and when there's multiple topics, the times are kept for when the topic discussion began. Just so you're aware of how executive session minutes work.
are there other board members who should reveal conflicts of interest or close connections with those who are employed by the district?
If it helps, conflict of interest means a situation when a board member's private interest as distinguished from the board member's interest as a member of the general public would benefit from or be harmed by a board decision. It is the ethical and legal duty of all school board members to avoid conflicts of interest as well as the appearance of conflicts of interest.
So if someone has a family member, for instance, who is in one of the unions, right, so that's.
So yes, I thought that was assumed. I have recused from negotiations, specifically teachers and support staff. I don't think I would technically need to recuse from administrative, but I have in the past when I felt it was the appearance.
I have, my sisters work at that school. Not as staff as.
So if that's the case, I would recommend that we would choose from negotiating. Did you say teachers?
A teacher and a support staff.
From those two, we call them collective bargaining. I think we have much larger bench of negotiators in terms of board members now, so.
Yeah, that's really good because of three of us.
Okay, so that's helpful to know because I am gonna state who's gonna go into an executive session.
In the executive session, could we have had it earlier in the day?
Because when I first joined the board, we used to have executive session ahead of the meeting, but we were trying to start the meeting earlier. And also, it's not best practice to have an executive session every meeting. That really shouldn't need to be the case. It did seem when I joined, like that was just standard practice. We had executive session before open session. So typically, also, we try not to keep the public waiting, and so we've been putting it at the end of the meeting instead of. And it also gives you some leeway to really dig in and ask and check for understanding. If you're not feeling well, I've got to get downstairs for the regular session that's about to start. Although, obviously, when our open meeting goes longer, it means now you have to go up there tired, so. Any other questions? So I did call for a motion. I'm happy to restate that if that. But just tactically, when I called for the motion, I also said, I asserted that it would be a disadvantage to the district not to do so in executive session. That was what Laura was asking about earlier about separate motions. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to move into executive session to discuss labor negotiations.
So moved.
So moves, do I have a second?
Second.
And seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Dan Boyer, Violet Nichols, Tim Warren, Seamus Abshir, And Joe McNeil, attorney, will be entering into executive session to discuss labor negotiations, and we will not return to our regular meeting to adjourn. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Gracie and Ally. And you'll have to receive those.
Leave our stuff.